Right, so Pokemon has been going for 30 years now. If you were 6 years old when Red and Blue came out in Britain, you're in your mid-30s. If you were 10, you're nearly 40. And yet here we are, still talking about it, still thinking about it, still noticing things. The franchise has over 1,000 Pokemon at this point. 1,025 as of Scarlet and Violet, which is a number that would have sounded absolutely made up in 1996. And more than the creatures themselves, what keeps people coming back is the world. The way it's built, the way it has been quietly, patiently accumulating lore across 3 decades in library books you almost missed, in Pokédex entries you skimmed past, in mythologies buried inside in-game towns that you probably ran through without stopping to read the signs. Game Freak has been doing something a bit peculiar for all this time. They make games aimed at children, and inside those games they've been hiding things. Not always dark things, but often strange ones. Ghost Pokemon, whose origins are more honest about death than most media aimed at adults. Villains whose motivations, once you follow them properly, stop being simple. Mechanics that, if you apply the in-world logic, raise questions that the games have no intention of answering. And the fan community has been pulling all of it apart from the beginning. Theories have accumulated the way lore accumulates, slowly, through patience, through people paying considerably more attention than was strictly necessary. Tonight, we're going through 100 of them. Some of these are confirmed, some are fan theories built on real evidence, some are speculation that fits together well enough that it's difficult to dismiss. And a few are genuinely a bit wild, but I've included them because they're interesting to sit with, even when they're probably not true. There's no particular structure you need to follow. Each theory is self-contained. Each section covers about 10 of them, loosely grouped by theme. We'll start with the Pokédex, work through the world's history, the characters, the villains, the ghost types, the legendaries, and eventually land on the theories that are mostly just fun to think about at 1 in the morning. If you're planning to fall asleep somewhere in the middle of this, that's perfect. That's what this is for. Nothing here builds to a grand reveal. It's just a long, comfortable walk through a fictional world that a lot of people have spent a lot of years caring about. One quick thing before we get going, if you enjoy this sort of video and you haven't subscribed yet, I'd really appreciate it. There are a lot of Pokemon games and a lot of lore to get through, and these take time. That's the only time I'll mention it. Right, starting as always with the Pokédex. The Pokédex is where Game Freak hides most of the strange stuff. If you grew up playing these games, you probably skimmed the entries. Brief flavor text, a habitat note, some numbers, and then you got older and actually read them properly. And you realised that whoever was writing those entries was, for lack of a better word, not pulling their punches. These are games rated E for everyone. The Pokédex reads, occasionally, like it did not receive that memo. Drifloon is a small purple balloon Pokemon. It looks, rather precisely, like something a child would happily grab in a park. This is intentional. The Pearl Pokédex entry reads, it tugs on the hands of children to steal them away. However, it gets pulled around instead. So far so harmless, a little balloon that wants to kidnap children, but keeps getting outsmarted by the children. Charming even. Then Pokemon Sun came out in 2016, and the entry was updated to, stories go that it grabs the hands of small children and drags them away to the afterlife. Not tries to steal them, drags them to the afterlife. That's quite a significant upgrade in intent. The escalation across those entries is the bit I find most interesting. Game Freak spent roughly a decade softening the implication, and then Sun just said it plainly. And it's still a Pokemon you can put in your party. The creature that induces sleep and takes children away can be taught Thunderbolt. No notes. Hypno has been around since Gen 1, and its Pokédex entries have always been somewhat unsettling. They've gotten worse over time. The Fire Red entry, which is 2004, a children's game, reads that Hypno carries away people having good dreams and is even known to have stolen a child at one point. One child. Just the once, apparently. A bit of an incident. That wasn't just Pokédex text in isolation. There's an anime episode, episode 27, Hypno's Nap Time, where children in an entire town go missing. They've been hypnotized and are wandering the park, behaving like Pokemon. This aired on television, aimed at children. The episode is mostly played for comedy. In the Alola games, Hypno is partially redeemed. The Sun entry notes that cases of Hypno targeting humans are notably rare in Alola, and that some Hypno assist doctors with patients who can't sleep. So the lore is doing some work to rehabilitate it. But the earlier entries left the child snatching detail standing for about 20 years before anyone thought to add the asterisk. There's also this. A clothing company called Pokemon 131 made a shirt referencing Hypno's kidnapping Pokédex entry. It was the only design from that collection not re-released in the United States. Make of that what you will. Phantump is, depending on how you read the Pokédex, not technically a theory at all. It's just lore, canon. The game states it plainly. The X entry says, "These Pokemon are stumps possessed by the spirits of children who died while lost in the forest." That's it. A ghost type. A dead child's spirit animating a tree stump. Then the Shield entry deepens it. With a voice like a human child's, it cries out to lure adults deep into the forest, getting them lost among the trees. So a Pokemon made from the spirit of a lost child uses that child's voice to lure other people into the forest to get them lost too. Whether it's doing this deliberately or instinctively or simply because it's lonely, the Pokédex doesn't say. It describes the behaviour and leaves you with it. What I always come back to with Phantump is the catching mechanic. You can catch one, you can put it in a Pokeball, you own it. Whether that's better or worse than leaving it wandering the woods alone is a question the games have no interest in answering. Yamask might be the most quietly sad entry in the Pokédex. Not frightening, just sad. The black entry reads, "Each of them carries a mask that used to be its face when it was human. Sometimes they look at it and cry." That's all of it. They were human. The mask is their literal face, not a representation of it, not inspired by it, their actual face removed, and sometimes they hold it up and weep. The Shield entry adds, "The spirit of a person from a bygone age became this Pokemon. It rambles through ruins, searching for someone who knows its face. Someone who knows its face, not someone who can give it back, not someone who can help. Just someone who remembers. And bygone age suggests the person it's looking for has been dead for centuries. There's no reunion coming. It just keeps looking." Yamask is a mid-tier ghost type that most players train briefly and then bench. Its Pokédex, in roughly 50 words, is doing something most prestige television wouldn't attempt. This one is different in tone. It's less dark and more just quietly tragic, in a very small way. The Ruby Pokédex. Spoink bounces around on its tail. The shock of its bouncing makes its heart pump. As a result, this Pokemon cannot afford to stop bouncing. If it stops, its heart will stop. Spoink cannot rest, not ever, under any circumstances. It also carries a pearl on its head to amplify its psychic power, and several entries describe it frantically searching for the pearl if it goes missing. So Spoink is a creature that must keep moving at all times or die, and when it misplaces the thing that makes it stronger, it panics. The question I've always had is what happens when Spoink is deposited in the PC storage system? The game converts Pokemon to data when you store them. But does the data include the bouncing? Is there a digital Spoink out there, in some server somewhere, bouncing indefinitely because the alternative is not existing? The game definitely doesn't say. I think about it more than is probably healthy. Gorbis is a beautiful Pokemon. Long, pink, elegant. It looks like something you'd find painted on a decorative plate in a nice house. The Ruby entry. Gorbis lives in the southern seas. At extreme depths, its body is built to withstand the enormous pressure of water at incredible depths. The contrast is deliberate. Gorbis is specifically designed to look graceful and lovely, and the Pokédex reveals that it uses its long, thin mouth to stab prey and drain their body fluids to to survive. There's also the colouring detail. Gorbis's pink comes from its prey. Its diet is what makes it beautiful. Everything elegant about it is a product of something considerably less so. A lot of players chose Gorbis over Huntail when evolving Clamperl, partly because Gorbis looks nicer. The Pokédex was, the whole time, explaining exactly why it looks that way. This is less a single entry, and more a pattern that runs through the entire Mega Evolution Pokédex, and once you notice it, it's difficult to unsee. Mega Evolution was introduced in Gen 6 as a temporary power boost. Pokémon transform, usually become stronger, look more dramatic. Game Freak then wrote Pokédex entries for each of the Mega forms, and those entries are a bit alarming. Mega Glaarly's jaw is forcibly snapped open during the transformation and can no longer close properly. Mega Aerodactyl erupts with spines, and the entries describe the process as painful. Mega Garchomp tears its own wing structure mid-transformation. Mega Gyarados, already famously unstable, loses its sense of self entirely. The entry says it becomes so violent that it tears apart anything it looks at. Not powered up, lobotomized. The trainer bond angle makes it stranger. Canonically, Mega Evolution is powered by resonance between the trainer's keystone and the Pokémon's Megastone. The bond enables the transformation, which means if these entries are accurate, the bond is also enabling the pain. Mega Evolution was phased out in mainline games after Gen 7 and isn't available in Sword Shield or any later main series titles. Game Freak has never given a reason. Reading through these entries, it's not hard to imagine someone internally raising a concern about the mechanic they'd created. In Sword and Shield, a researcher named Cara Liss, a pun on careless, and yes, I believe that was intentional, restores fossil Pokémon by combining halves from different extinct species. You get Dracovish, a fish head on a dinosaur body. Arctovish, a frozen fish head on a plesiosaur-like lower half. Arctozolt, an electric upper body fused to an ice-type lower body. Each one is a mismatched chimera of two genetically distinct individuals of the same species. Then the Pokédex describes what it's like to be them. Arctovish has trouble breathing in the air, but its body is aquatic. It is always either drowning or suffocating, depending on where it is. Arctozolt shivers constantly because the shaking of its freezing upper half generates electricity for its body, and that same freezing lets it keep food preserved on its body. Dracovish's entries note that its jaw is extraordinarily powerful, but because it can only breathe underwater, it can't breathe unless it's underwater. The game presents this as a light-hearted feature. These Pokémon are available for competitive play. Dracovish was, for a period, one of the most dominant competitive Pokémon in its generation. The lore is describing creatures whose entire existence is a medical emergency, created through scientific carelessness, that was then named with a pun. Cara Liss faces no consequences in the game. She just keeps going. This one is shorter, but it's worth including because of how quietly extreme it is. Medicham's psychic power comes from meditation, specifically from intensive fasting. Multiple Pokédex entries describe it subsisting on almost nothing, training deep in mountains for weeks at a stretch, pushing its physical needs as far as possible to heighten its mental capacity. The path to psychic power in the Pokémon world, as described in these entries, involves something fairly serious in terms of what's done to the body, which contrasts interestingly with how Medicam looks. Very balanced, very zen, very cheerful in the official art. The game doesn't draw attention to the method, it just puts it in the Pokédex and continues. The Fire Red entry for Houndoom. Upon hearing its eerie howls, other Pokémon get the shivers and head straight back to their nests. Those unfortunate enough to be burned by them must endure pain that lingers for a long time. Several generations of Pokédex entries repeat this. Burns from Houndoom are persistent. The Pokédex says those burns never heal, and the pain never goes away. The damage is permanent, in a way that other fire-type burns apparently aren't. Which raises a question about what happens in a battle when a Houndoom uses Flamethrower. The game represents it as a standard attack. Pokemon use it, the target takes damage, the battle continues, but the lore says any burn from Houndoom is a lifelong injury. This gap between what the mechanics show and what the lore describes is one of the recurring themes across the franchise, and we'll come back to it a few more times tonight. The games need abstractions to function. What those abstractions are covering up is a matter of interpretation. Those are the entries, but the Pokédex is just the surface. The stranger theories live deeper in what Pokemon actually are. The Pokédex entries are unsettling, but the deeper theories are about the nature of the creatures themselves, what they actually are, where they came from, whether the line between Pokemon and humans is as clear as the games imply. This theory has been circulating since the 90s, and the reason it won't go away is that the evidence for it keeps accumulating with each new generation. Cubone's lore is fairly well known. It wears the skull of its dead mother on its head and cries at night while staring at the moon. The skull is its protection and its grief, expressed simultaneously. For a Gen 1 Pokemon, that's a significant amount of characterization. Now, Kangaskhan usually carries a baby in its pouch. The baby is built into the design, it's just there. And the baby Kangaskhan looks remarkably similar to Cubone, same round head, similar proportions. The official lore notes that the baby leaves the pouch at around 3 years old. If a Kangaskhan dies before her child is 3, the orphaned baby has no home, no model for what to become, and one thing nearby, a skull. So it finds the skull. It becomes Cubone. The Sun and Moon games added what's probably the strongest detail to date. In the call for help mechanic, which typically summons a Pokemon from the same evolutionary line, a Cubone can call a Kangaskhan. Not a Marowak, which is what Cubone evolves into. A Kangaskhan from a completely different evolutionary line. That connection shouldn't exist unless something connects them. Game Freak has never confirmed this, but they keep adding evidence and saying nothing, which is its own kind of answer. This is one of the oldest theories in the community, and its staying power is due almost entirely to location data and statistical coincidence, which is to say, the kind of evidence that's hard to dismiss. In Gen 1, Ditto appears in multiple locations. Routes 13, 14, 15 and 23, the Pokemon Mansion, on Cinnabar Island, and inside Cerulean Cave. That's it. Nowhere else. Cinnabar Island is where the Pokemon Mansion is, the burned-out research facility whose journals document the creation of Mewtwo from Mew's DNA. Cerulean Cave is where Mewtwo lives at the end of the game. Ditto is found in multiple places in Gen 1, including Routes 13, 14, 15 and 23, the Cinnabar Island area, and Cerulean Cave. Ditto and Mew share the same evenly distributed base stat pattern across all 6 statistics, but Mew's are 100, while Ditto's are 48. Both of them learn Transform. Both are small and rounded with similar silhouettes. Ditto is pinkish purple, which is roughly what you'd expect from a Mew-derived experiment that didn't quite succeed. The colour is off. The transformation is imperfect. And when Ditto transforms, the face is always correct. When Ditto copies another Pokemon, sometimes the expression doesn't match. Sometimes the eyes stay different. The game never explains why, but if Ditto is an imperfect copy of Mew, that persistent wrongness makes a certain kind of sense. Game Freak has never confirmed this, but they've also never explained why Ditto only appears in those 2 places, and they've never explained the shared stat total. Both facts are just sitting there, and both questions are still open. Parasect is a bug Pokemon with a large mushroom growing from its back. The mushroom is a parasitic fungus, and the Pokédex has been telling you across multiple generations that it has fully taken over the host. The real-world parallel is Cordyceps, a genus of fungi that infects insects, takes control of their motor functions, and eventually forces them to fulfill the fungus's reproductive requirements. The insect's behaviour is overridden. The insect, by most definitions, is gone. Parasect's eyes are blank and white, no pupils. Paras, its pre-evolution, has visible black pseudopupils. Something changes between Paras and Parasect, and the Pokédex describes that change as the fungus fully taking over. The theory, Parasect is not a Pokémon that has a fungus problem. It is a fungus that has a Pokémon-shaped structure underneath it, maintaining locomotion. Whatever was inside Paras has been absent for some time. This does somewhat reframe the experience of training one. You're not building a partnership with a creature. You're, in a sense, farming a fungal organism that happens to have legs and a type chart, which is a bit odd, honestly. This one comes not from the Pokédex, but from the Canalave Library in Pokémon Diamond and Pearl, a building you can walk past without ever entering, containing bookshelves, containing books, containing lines like this. A long time ago, there was no distinction between Pokémon and people, and separately. In the beginning, there were only Pokémon and people living together. There was no distinction between them. These are just there, on shelves, in a library that the main story eventually requires you to visit. The theory built around these passages, somewhere in the deep past of the Pokémon world, humans and Pokémon were the same thing. Something happened, an event, a choice, a slow biological or cultural drift, and the two groups became separate. Different enough to have different relationships with the world, but close enough that the boundary between them is occasionally blurred. The supporting evidence is everywhere once you look. Yamask is a human spirit that became a Pokémon. Phantump is a dead child's ghost. Slowking can speak. Various Pokémon demonstrate cognitive and emotional capacities that the games usually attribute only to humans. And in Legends, Arceus, set in what the game implies is an early, pre-modern era, the relationship between humans and Pokémon is still being negotiated. It isn't settled history. It's an ongoing question. The Canalave Library books are easy to miss. In Pokémon Diamond and Pearl, the mainline story actually sends you there, but the implication they contain, that the separation between species is relatively recent and possibly reversible, is one of the most interesting things the franchise has ever quietly dropped into the world. This is probably the most aesthetic of the theories in this section. It's more visual than evidential, and I think it might be more interesting as an image than as a provable claim. If you hold the silhouettes of Clefable and Gengar side by side, they're nearly identical. Same general shape, same stubby limbs, same rounded head. Clefable is a fairy type that evolves from Clefairy, a Pokémon closely connected to the moon and Moon. Moon, moonlight, pale and round and associated with goodness. Gengar is a ghost poison type that lives in shadows and is described as a predator of warmth and life force. The theory. Gengar is what Clefable's shadow became when the light hit it from the right angle, or what Clefable becomes in some reflected dimension, or more poetically, what the moon looks like from the other side. It's probably not literally true. The design overlap might be coincidence, but part of what makes the Pokémon fan community worth being part of is the willingness to take something like a shared silhouette and build a mythology around it. The theory doesn't need to be confirmed, it just needs to be interesting. And the moon connection, the fairy type retroactively applied in Gen 6, the same celestial body that Clefable is tied to, while Gengar is fan speculated to be its shadow, is too clean to feel entirely accidental. Mimikyu is a ghost and fairy type that hides permanently under a hand-drawn Pikachu disguise. Its real form, canonically, is so horrifying that seeing it kills people. The game treats this as a running joke more than once, but its motivation is entirely sympathetic. The Moon Pokédex entry, a lonely Pokémon, it conceals its terrifying appearance beneath an old rag, so it can get closer to people and other Pokémon. It wants to be loved. It dresses as Pikachu because Pikachu is beloved. It just wants someone to be happy to see it. The theory? Mimikyu is the ghost of a dead Deden. Deden is an electric and fairy type, small, round-eared, mouse-adjacent, notably similar to Pikachu. If a Dedenne died feeling unloved, it might become a ghost, and a ghost that simply wants affection might imitate the most beloved Pokémon it could think of, in the hope that someone would reach out. Game Freak has never officially revealed to the public what Mimikyu actually looks like under the disguise. That question has remained unanswered ever since Mimikyu was introduced in Gen 7, which means this theory has survived purely because the blank was never filled in. Wobbuffet is a large, blue, vaguely cylindrical Pokémon. Its entire competitive identity is reactive. It responds to what opponents do rather than initiating anything. It's also extraordinarily protective of its tail. The tail is small and black, positioned at the back, and it appears to have its own face. The tail has eye spots, not an expression. Multiple Pokédex entries describe Wobbuffet as extremely protective of its tail and frantic in its attempts to conceal it. It tries to hide it. The gold entry notes that the tail seems to be particularly sensitive. The theory, Wobbuffet's actual self, is the tail. The large blue body is a decoy, a very convincing one, an entire fake body, designed to absorb impacts, while the real creature shelters behind it. This would explain Wobbuffet's moveset. If the main body is a lure rather than the organism, it doesn't need to attack. It just needs to survive long enough that whatever is inside the tail stays safe. Hence Counter, Mirror Coat, Destiny Bond, all reactive responses, nothing proactive. It's a Pokémon that has, theoretically, been walking around with its own body as a disguise, and getting very anxious whenever you look too closely at the real part. The official explanation: alternate coloration, rare, with a base shiny encounter rate from Generation 6 onward of roughly 1 in 4,096. The biological theories that have circulated, albinism, melanism, regional pigmentation variants, reasonable enough for why a Charizard might be jet black instead of orange. But the narrative angle has always interested me more than the biology. In the anime, shiny Pokémon are treated as rare colour variants. In the Pokémon games, the red Gyarados in the Lake of Rage is specifically the result of Team Rocket's forced evolution experiments. It's shiny because something was done to it. The abnormal colouring is a record of what happened. If you extend that logic, what happened to the other shinies? The coal-black Charizard, the lavender Gengar, the gold Magikarp. The colour being wrong implies something in the individual's history was different. The theory isn't that shinies are always products of something terrible. It's that they might not be random. They might carry some kind of record that the Pokédex isn't measuring. The games don't say. But the question is there, and it hasn't been closed. When Nincada evolves into Ninjask, something unusual happens. If you have an empty party slot, a second Pokémon appears in your party, and in most generations this also requires a spare Pokéball. This is Shedinja, the shed shell Nincada left behind during evolution. Shedinja's HP is permanently 1. Shedinja's HP cannot be raised above 1, cannot be healed beyond 1. Its 1 HP cannot be permanently raised by any standard in-game mechanic. Its ability, Wonder Guard, makes it immune to almost every attack, because there's apparently nothing inside it to damage. The back of its body has a hole in it. The Pokédex warns that looking into the hole will result in your soul being taken. The theory isn't really about what Shedinja is, so much as what it represents. It's not alive in the way that Ninjask is alive. It's the shape of something that used to be alive. The empty space where something was, which has somehow acquired the ability to exist and move and battle. The residue of a thing, animated. Nothing about Shedinja makes sense in any conventional biological framework. The games only go as far as saying it's the discarded shell left behind when Nincada evolves, without explaining how that shell becomes a living ghost type, or how it actually works. It simply appears in the slot where there was nothing, and the Pokédex acknowledges its existence and continues with the next entry. This has been in the Pokédex since Gen 3, and somehow keeps surprising people when they encounter it. The red entry, lives where reedy plants grow. It seems to have a caring disposition. However, its numbers are decreasing according to its Pokédex entry. The leek it carries, its signature item, its only weapon, was the reason. People wanted the Pokémon and its accompanying vegetable. In the original Gen 1 games, Farfetch'd is only obtainable through an in-game trade. You cannot catch one in the wild, in Kanto. This is canonically because there aren't many left. The Galarian form is notably different, slightly bulkier, portrayed as a brave warrior that wields a thicker leek like a weapon, and generally looks more unfriendly and aggressive. Sirfetch'd, its evolution, is essentially a knight. The theory, generations of being hunted applied selection pressure. The Farfetch'd that survived were the ones willing to fight back. What was once prey became, through decades of necessity, something considerably harder to kill, which makes Sirfetch'd not just a fun design, but a small ecological parable embedded in the evolution chain. Those are the creatures, but the world they live in has its own history, and some of it is stranger and older than the games tend to acknowledge. The Pokémon world has a history. The games don't tell you all of it. Quite a lot of it is left in the margins. Architecture that doesn't make sense, locations that are abandoned without explanation, lore buried in books that the main quest never sends you to read. But it's there if you look. This is one of the earliest observations people made about Gen 1, and it's also one of the most quietly significant. Where are all the adult men in Kanto? Ash's father is never seen, never named, referred to only in the vaguest terms. The gym leaders are either women, elderly men, or in Lost Surge's case, a very obvious veteran. The Pokémon Center staff are women. The police are women. The authority figures are mostly female or old. The male trainers on the routes are children, retirees and other adult men. The theory, there was a war and a generation of men didn't come back from it. Lateos Surge makes this almost explicit. He's a large, visibly military man whose dialogue includes, "I tell you, electric Pokémon saved me during the war. I was a soldier, but my Pokémon got me through." He doesn't say which war, he doesn't say when, but he says it plainly in a children's game, and the game moves on without addressing it. Giovanni runs Team Rocket with a military-level organisational structure. The Safari Zone Warden is an older man. Professor Oak is elderly. The demographic gap is everywhere once you look for it. And the simplest explanation, that the generation of men who would now be in their 30s and 40s simply isn't there, has never been contradicted by the games. 150 years before the events of Gold and Silver, the brass tower in Ecruteak City burned down. A storm of fire, lightning, and ice consumed it. 3 Pokémon were inside when it happened, and they died. Ho-Oh, watching from above, resurrected them, and they became Entei, Raikou, and Suicune, embodying, respectively, the fire that killed them, the lightning of the storm that burned the building, and the rain that fell on the blaze. Suicune purifies polluted water. It runs across the land. It can never stop moving. There's a theory about why, 150 years before Gold and Silver, the brass tower in Ecruteak City burned down. A storm of fire and lightning consumed it. 3 Pokémon died inside. Ho-Oh, watching from above, resurrected them, and they became Entei, Raikou, and Suicune, carrying the fire, lightning, and rain of their own deaths in their bodies. Suicune is still running because it can't stop. On the night it died, the building was on fire and there was no way out. And something in whatever Ho-Oh returned to it, whatever portion of the original, is still in there, has been trying to outrun those flames ever since, still looking for clean water in a place that was burning. Entei causes volcanic eruptions when it roars. Raikou carries a storm in its back. They're all preserved in the moment of what killed them, wrapped in the elemental force of their own death, which is a strange way to be resurrected, but also, maybe, the only honest way. Lavender Town's Pokémon Tower is where dead Pokémon are buried. The entire structure is a grave. Every Pokémon that dies in Kanto, presumably, ends up there eventually. The first time you enter it, there's a ghost that can't be identified without the Sylph Scope. With the scope, You can see that it's a Marowak, a wild Marowak, not a trainer's Pokemon, killed by Team Rocket. This detail matters. Team Rocket killed a wild Pokemon, a Marowak, that later haunted the Pokemon Tower. In the one place that's supposed to be sacred, in the cemetery, and the ghost won't leave until you deal with it. She's guarding the upper floors from the people who killed her, and she can't get back to her child because the tower is between her and Lavender Town. The broader theory is about what the tower's existence implies. Kanto has one major burial tower for its dead, and it's in a small town filled with a collection of ghost-type Pokemon. The culture has a defined relationship with Pokemon death. They get gravestones, they get towers, they get visits. But when Heart Gold and Soul Silver remade Johto, a new radio tower in Lavender Town took over as the broadcast facility, while the Pokemon Tower's memorial role moved to the House of Memories. They built a radio tower on top of the cemetery. The community moved on. The ghost probably didn't. The Sylphscope is an item from Gen 1. Official purpose lets you identify the ghost in the Pokemon Tower, so you can battle it rather than flee from it. Team Rocket has it in their Celadon City hideout, and you have to beat Giovanni there to get it back. The question the theory starts from: why does Team Rocket want an item that reveals ghosts? What does a criminal organization with a focus on Pokemon exploitation want with a device for seeing spirits? One reading: the Sylphscope's ability to see through disguises and identify hidden things has broader applications. It might have been designed as a surveillance tool, a way to detect concealed or disguised threats, and the ghost revealing function is a side effect of that more general capability. Another reading: Team Rocket was interested in ghost-type Pokemon specifically. The same organization that tried to take over Sylph's facilities to steal the Master Ball and exploit Pokemon in Celadon also had something going on in Lavender Town. The two storylines run parallel: Sylph co-at the tower, the scope, but the games never fully connect them. What was Team Rocket planning to do with ghost-type Pokemon? The game never says. Giovanni leaves without explaining. The Sylphscope becomes a key item you use once and never think about again. In the original Kanto games, the power plant is located off Route 10, and by the time you reach it, it's been completely abandoned. No workers, there is no management in the original Kanto power plant. Just wild Electabuzz wandering the corridors and Zapdos somewhere in the back. The building still works, more or less. Lights are on. Power is active. Someone built this, staffed it, and then left very suddenly. The theory: the abandonment wasn't a planned closure. Something happened that drove everyone out. The presence of wild electric-type Pokemon suggests they were drawn to the power source and may have made the facility impossible to staff. An Electabuzz wandering a working power plant is not a safe environment for maintenance crews. The Fire Red and Leaf Green remakes add a detail. A Team Rocket member appears in the plant trying to steal the machine part, a key component of the generator. This means Team Rocket has unfinished business with the facility. It also means the generator is still functional enough to be worth stealing from. What happened between the plant being built, staffed, and operational, and the moment it became a habitat for wild electric Pokemon isn't in the game. It's just implied by the architecture. Something went wrong. Nobody came back to fix it. Two ghosts live in the old chateau in Eterna Forest. An old man in the dining room who disappears when you approach. A small girl in the corridors who passes through walls. Neither speaks, neither acknowledges you. They just appear and vanish. The game doesn't tell you who they were or what happened. The most common reading: the old man was the owner. The girl was someone who lived there, a daughter or a servant's child. Something happened that neither of them has been able to leave behind, so they're still there, in whatever configuration of a house exists for ghosts. There's also a hidden room in Team Galactic's Eterna building, accessible only with a specific key item, containing appliances for Rotom, a ghost-type Pokemon that possesses electrical appliances. The chateau has a working television, a functioning refrigerator, a washing machine. in a building abandoned by its owner and left to rot. Someone has been keeping the electricity running. In a ghost house, because a Pokemon moved into the appliances and it has nowhere better to be. Whether the old man and the girl are aware of Rotom, or whether they're all just existing in parallel in the same space, the game isn't saying. The Pokemon Mansion on Cinnabar Island is a burned ruin when you arrive in Gen 1. Inside are journals left by the researchers who worked there, scattered across the floors. The journals document, in brief entries, everything. The discovery of a Mew in the Guyana jungle, the extraction of its DNA, the creation of Mewtwo in a laboratory, the tracking of Mewtwo's development, and then eventually hints of Mewtwo's development and growing hostility, but not a detailed catalogue of its emotional growth, capacity for suffering, or rage. The final entries describe Mewtwo's uncontrollable power. The theory isn't complicated. Mewtwo didn't just escape. Mewtwo destroyed the place deliberately, and the burned ruin you're walking through is the evidence. The wild Pokemon in the ruins are descendants of experiment subjects that fled. The journal entries were left because whoever wrote them didn't get a chance to take them. What makes the mansion memorable isn't the lore itself, which is dark but fairly clear, but the delivery. This is a children's game. The main story of Gen 1 requires you to visit Cinnabar Mansion. You wander in of your own accord, find these journals on the floor, read them while wild Pokemon attack you, and leave with the knowledge that the building you're standing in was destroyed by the creature you're about to catch in the cave on the other side of the island. It's one of the earliest examples of environmental storytelling in the franchise. It still holds up. In Gen 1, the SS Anne is docked in Vermilion City's harbour. You board it, navigate it, get HM cut from the seasick captain, and leave. And then it sails away. If you surf in the harbour area afterward, you can see the truck in the distance, departing. You cannot board it again. It will never return to Vermilion. In the original game, it simply goes. The theory isn't dark exactly, more curious. Where is the ship going? The SS Aqua in Johto makes the Olivine to Vermilion run, but it's a different ship. Nobody explains what the SS Anne is doing in Vermilion, beyond being a luxury cruise liner that sails the world and stops there once a year, where its last port was before you boarded it, or where it's headed after it leaves. The original game has several pieces of content that feel like this. Things that were part of something larger that didn't quite make it into the final version. The SS Anne might be one of them, or it might have been a deliberate choice to leave the departure unexplained, to create the sense that the world continues past the edges of the map. It sailed away and was never seen again. Nobody in the games accounts for this. Nobody explains it. It just goes. The Pokemon regions are based on real places. Kanto is the actual Kanto region of Japan. Johto is Kansai. Hoenn is Kyushu. Sinnoh is Hokkaido. Unova is New York and New Jersey. Kalos is France. Alola is Hawaii. Galar is Britain. Paldea is based on the Iberian Peninsula. This is not secret. The games lean into the inspiration openly. The theory is about what happens when you apply the real geography to the in-world history. If Kanto is Kanto, Japan, then the demographic gap from the war maps to a real historical context. If Hoenn is Kyushu, then the conflict between sea and land, Team Aqua and Team Magma, maps to an island culture that has historically navigated exactly that tension. Legends. Arceus is set in what the game strongly suggests is the equivalent of Japan's Meiji period, the late 19th century, when Japan was undergoing rapid industrialization and the old cultural structures were being renegotiated. The Galaxy Expedition team are colonizers, functionally arriving with technology and a different relationship to Pokemon and reshaping the indigenous culture of Hisui. That tension is not subtle. When the games are drawing on real history, the real history tends to illuminate what the game is doing. The regions aren't just inspiration, they're framing. In Gen 4 and beyond, wild Pokemon can be holding items when you encounter them. A Chansey might be carrying a lucky egg, a love disc might have a heart scale, Certain Pokemon in specific areas carry specific items consistently. The theory? These items don't just spawn randomly. In the world of the game, they were left behind. Some entries support this directly. Luvdisc's lore includes the detail that heart scales are shed from their bodies, so the Luvdisc carrying heart scales have grown and shed them over time. Meowth collects shiny objects, and Murkrow is known to steal and hoard various items. Items with obvious practical value, potions, full restores, revives, do not normally show up on wild Pokemon in routes and caves. The darker extension, a trainer who dies in the wild would leave their items behind. Their Pokemon might scatter. The Pokemon that remain in the area might pick up the belongings, not out of understanding, but out of whatever instinct drives them to collect things. The full restore held by a wild Pokemon deep in a cave might have been the last item a trainer had. The games don't say this, but the mechanic, read that way, turns every held item into a small piece of archaeology. Those are the places and the histories, but the people in this world, or the characters, at any rate, are their own particular kind of strange. The protagonists and recurring figures in Pokemon are deliberately underwritten in most cases. They're vessels for the player, intentionally blank, defined by what you project onto them. But the blank spaces have their own implications, and the characters around the protagonist are sometimes more specific than they appear. In Pokemon Gold and Silver, Red is at the top of Silver, standing in a blizzard, alone. He has no dialogue. When you defeat him, he doesn't speak. He teleports away without a word. His Pokemon are the highest leveled of any trainer in the game, in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, the highest of any trainer in any mainline game up to that point. The theory? Red isn't there because he had nowhere else to go. He's there because he went somewhere no one else could reach, and he's been training until someone worthy came. He's already beaten the Kanto Pokemon League. He's already caught every Pokemon. The champion title is behind him. There's nothing left to prove in Kanto, not to himself, not to anyone who could find him there. So he went higher. He went somewhere a bad trainer can't follow, at the top of a mountain that requires surf and waterfall and strength to navigate, above the snowline, in weather that would send most people back down. And he waited. His silence when you defeat him is part of it. He has nothing to say to someone who beat him, because the only response to losing that matters is to go and get stronger. He'll be back on Mount Silver, before you've reached the next town. This is one of the most well-known theories in the community, and I'd rather not skip it because it deserves to be treated carefully, not just mentioned. In Gen 1 and its remakes, your rival, Blue in the international release only, has a Raticate on his team during the SSN rival battle. You battle him several times. You beat him. When you encounter him inside the Pokemon Tower in Lavender Town, the Raticate is gone. Blue's team no longer has it. The Pokemon Tower is where dead Pokemon are buried. The theory? One of your battles with Blue was severe enough that his Raticate didn't recover, and he's in Lavender Town to mourn it. He's notably subdued in that encounter, less boastful than usual, not dwelling on the battle, leaving without much commentary. The game doesn't confirm this, but the game also doesn't have another explanation for where the Raticate went, and it's the only encounter in the game where Blue is in a location associated with Pokemon death. If it's true, it means something about every rival battle you've had since you started the game. It means the abstraction of fainting sometimes hides something the game isn't quite willing to say out loud. N. Natural Harmonia. Gropius, the king of Team Plasma, in Black and White, was raised by Pokemon, kept isolated from other humans, given a castle to live in, filled with Pokemon he was supposedly liberating, actually kept for his development as a king. His abilities, he can hear Pokemon's thoughts, he can communicate with them in a way that the protagonist cannot. He processes the world differently from other humans. He treats battles like equations, he misreads social situations, he functions on a different register from everyone around him. The theory? N is either a Zoroark in disguise or was so thoroughly raised among Pokemon that he became something between the two species. The evidence for the Zoroark angle is circumstantial but persistent. His long green hair and certain design elements echo Zoroark's spiky hairstyle. There are multiple points in the game where Zoroark appears shortly before or after N. One specific moment, interacting with a Zoroark, triggers a flashback that appears to be from N's perspective, has been picked apart by fans since 2010. Whether or not he's literally a Zoroark, the game is clearly doing something with the idea that the line between N and Pokemon is thinner than the line between you and Pokemon. He's on the Pokemon side, not because he chose it as a philosophy, but because he was raised inside that perspective. In the first episode of the original anime, Ash sees a rainbow-coloured Pokemon flying across a rainbow-lit sky later that day after he begins his journey. Some Ho-Oh Pokédex-style entries state, "It is said that anyone seeing it is promised eternal happiness." He never ages. He resets in some regions, he wins some, loses some, forms bonds, says goodbye, and starts fresh in a new place. And he's happy, consistently, genuinely happy, in a way that's unusual for a fictional protagonist. Most protagonists are defined by what they want and don't have. Ash is defined by what he has, and keeps finding more of. This reading was originally developed on Reddit and spread fairly widely in the fan community. It reframes his perpetual youth, not as a narrative oversight, but as a consequence of something that happened in the first 4 minutes of the first episode. The blessing of eternal happiness, applied to a 10-year-old boy who loves Pokemon, looks exactly like what the anime has been showing for 30 years. He got exactly what he would have wanted. The journey doesn't end because it was never supposed to. Deep in the data of the original Pokemon Red and Blue, there's a fully programmed trainer battle. It can be accessed through in-game glitch techniques like Trainer Fly on original hardware. It was never intended to be reached in normal play. The trainer is Professor Oak, his team, a Tauros, an Exeggutor, an Arcanine, a Gyarados, and a fully evolved starter, all part of a powerful high-level party that's only accessible through glitches. All substantially more powerful than the Champions team. He's the strongest trainer in the game, and he was cut. The theory, Professor Oak was always meant to be the final challenge, the true end of the game, not the championship. The championship's predecessor, the man who sent you out, waiting at the end to see if you'd actually become what you set out to be. Why was he cut? Probably time constraints. Possibly because it felt strange to fight your mentor. But the Delta is there, largely functional, and the team is balanced in a way that suggests it was designed with care, not placeholder. He's ready. He's just never been reached. In Legends, Arceus, a woman named Cogita, appears periodically to provide lore about the legendaries and the history of Hisui. She's white-haired, knows everything, seems connected to the deepest layers of the region's mythology, and never quite explains how she knows what she knows. Cynthia is the champion of Sinnoh in Diamond and Pearl. She's blonde-haired, knows everything about Sinnoh's mythology, doesn't specialise in a single Pokemon type, and has a team that bears a notable resemblance to the team of Volo, the antagonist of Legends, Arceus. The theory, Cogita is the ancient ancestor of the line that eventually produces Cynthia. The family that keeps the knowledge, the women who know the true history of the region, who pass it down across generations, is the same line in both games. Cogita is who they were, Cynthia is who they became. Volo also mirrors Cynthia in his design, which has led many fans to suggest he and Cogita are related. The Legends Arceus antagonist is connected to both the Keeper of Ancient Knowledge and the modern-day champion, and the visual language is consistent enough that it seems deliberate. The games don't say it, they rarely do. At the start of Legends Arceus, the player character is pulled backward through time from the modern era into ancient Hisui by Arceus. They arrive on a beach, meet Professor Laventon, and build a relationship with the region, across the entire game. At the end of the game, after defeating Dialga and Palkia at the Temple of Sinnoh during the main story, the credits roll. The player character is still in ancient Hisui. There's no scene of them returning home, no portal, no goodbye to their original life. Just the ancient Hisui endgame, which continues indefinitely as they collect and survey. The theory, Arceus asked them to prove something, they proved it, and then the task was complete and no one thought about sending them back. The alternative reading, that Arceus did send them home, off-screen, is possible, but it's also possible that the player character we took through that entire game is still there, in a pre-industrial Japan equivalent, surrounded by people who are the ancestors of characters they might have known, living out the rest of their life in a time that isn't theirs. The fan theory extension, the player character becomes an ancestor of some Gen 4 character, which would explain why certain legends designs echo Diamond and Pearl characters, though this idea is purely speculative with no official confirmation. They didn't go home, they stayed, and eventually their descendants became the people we meet later. Silver is the rival in Gold and Silver. He's introduced being actively cruel, stealing his starter Pokemon, mistreating it, dismissing the idea that Pokemon are partners rather than tools. He's the classic rival done darker. Late in the game, you never find out who his father is, and Giovanni, the former leader of Team Rocket, simply disappears from the story after his defeat in Kanto. His father left. He grew up either alone or in a household shaped by Giovanni's absence and reputation. And his response to that, to powerlessness, to abandonment, to growing up on the wrong side of a famous story, was to treat everything around him as a tool. Some Pokemon are inspired by musical instruments. Strength is the only thing that matters. Compassion is weakness. His arc over the course of GSC and HGSS is slow and genuinely earned. He doesn't change because you beat him. He changes because he observes, over time, what a genuine partnership between a trainer and their Pokemon looks like, and can't dismiss what he sees. By the end, he's treating his Pokemon differently. Not warmly, Silver doesn't do warm, but with something approaching respect. The game never tells you what happens to him after the credits. He just stops appearing. Whether he found something better or went back to being alone, the game leaves unresolved. For a 1999 Game Boy Color RPG, Silver is doing something fairly uncommon, showing a character who is damaged in a recognizable way, for recognizable reasons, and who changes not because a lesson is delivered, but because the evidence accumulates. This is less a specific hidden lore theory, and more an observation about the structural premise of every mainline game. The protagonist is usually 10 years old in the anime, though game protagonists are different ages. Parents watch them leave and say something like, "Be safe." The entire society is built around the idea of children going into the wild with Pokemon. The theory, this isn't incidental to the setting, it's the economy. The Pokemon League system is the world's primary cultural institution. It trains the people who catch and work with Pokemon, who become the researchers and breeders and nurses and guards and gym leaders. Without the constant flow of 10-year-olds setting out on journeys, the whole structure collapses. Children are sent because the world has always sent them. Not because it's safe, it isn't, but because it's necessary. The system requires a fresh cohort of trainers every generation, and the culture has made that requirement feel like an adventure rather than a conscription. The protagonist isn't special for going. They're expected to go. What makes them special is what they find. Looker is an Interpol agent who appears in Pokemon Platinum, then Black and White, then X and Y, and then Sun and Moon. Not every game is set in a different region. Not every game takes place in a different era. Looker doesn't appear to age between his first appearance and his last. The simplest theory, Looker is a title or code name passed between agents. The person who shows up in Sinnoh is not the same person who appears in Carlos. The slightly more interesting theory, Looker is connected to the Ultra Wormhole system. He appears in Pokemon Platinum, tracking anomalous spacetime disturbances, the same phenomenon that produces Ultra Beasts in Alola. In Sun and Moon, his memory is fragmented, his past is unclear, and he has emotional baggage that doesn't fully connect to what we've seen of him before. The theory being that the Looker in Sun and Moon has travelled through time or dimensional rifts enough times that his personal history is no longer linear. His appearances in different games aren't sequential. They're scattered across his own timeline in an order that doesn't match the release dates, which would explain why he never seems to age. He's not aging in order, those are the characters. Now for the organisations they built and the ones they joined against their will. The evil teams in Pokemon have, over the years, become considerably more interesting than their early incarnations suggested they would be. Team Rocket in Gen 1 is basically a mafia with Pokemon. But by the time Gen 5 arrived, the franchise was doing something genuinely complicated with its antagonists, giving them internal logic, histories, and motivations that don't collapse when you follow them. Ash's father is never seen, never named, and only rarely meaningfully referenced. He's described only as being on a Pokemon journey, which in the context of the anime could mean almost anything. He's simply not there and never comes back. Giovanni, the head of Team Rocket and the Viridian Gym leader of Kanto, runs his organisation with a level of discipline and strategic intelligence that the anime occasionally acknowledges. His agents, Jesse and James, are cartoonishly incompetent, and they end up effectively following one child across multiple regions in the world for years. The theory: Giovanni assigned Jesse and James to watch Ash because Ash is his son. They're not supposed to capture Ash, they're not supposed to recruit him, they're just supposed to be near him, the two most harmless, most persistent, most guaranteed to fail grunts in the organisation, sent as babysitters in disguise. It would explain the persistence. Ash travels through at least 8 regions, and Team Rocket closely follows him through most of them, but not every single one. The universe of Pokemon is enormous. There are many more important things to steal than a Pikachu, but Jesse and James keep appearing, whether because they were assigned to watch over the son of their boss, or for some other reason, they never quite leave him alone. Team Aqua wants to expand the oceans. Team Magma wants to expand the land. They are, on paper, mirror images of the same bad idea executed in opposite directions. Except neither of their goals is actually irrational. And I find this the most interesting thing about Gen 3. Both teams are identifying something real. The world has finite space, and different species compete for it. Team Aqua is an extremist, water-focused eco-terrorist group. Team Magma is an extremist land rights group. Both have genuine arguments buried under their extremism. The issue isn't that their goals are wrong, it's that their methods involve enslaving ancient deities and possibly ending the world for the other group. Kyogre and Groudon predate the conflict entirely. Using them as tools is where both teams cross into something unjustifiable. Not the goal, the method. Rayquaza showing up to restore balance is the game's actual answer. Not more sea, not more land, but an equilibrium that neither team was capable of imagining. Which is a fairly honest statement about what happens when advocacy radicalizes past the point of compromise. Cyrus, the leader of Team Galactic in Gen 4, wants to destroy the universe and create a new one. That summary makes him sound simply megalomaniacal, but his actual dialogue is more specific. He wants a universe without incomplete spirits, a world without spirit that he believes will be free of the flaws that make people hurt each other and hurt themselves. His backstory: he grew up unable to connect with people or Pokemon. He describes his own heart as incomplete. He experienced the world as a place of constant unnecessary suffering, concluded that emotion was the source of that suffering, and extrapolated to the logical endpoint: remove emotion, remove suffering. He doesn't want power. He's not interested in ruling what comes after. He wants to exist in a universe where feeling things isn't the price of being alive. The theory: Cyrus is in extraordinary personal pain, and his plan to unmake existence is the most elaborate possible expression of that. He built an entire criminal organization and managed to temporarily enslave the deities of time and space. And what he was trying to do was make a world where emotions and spirit no longer exist. His name comes from a Persian word meaning sun. His Pokemon's themes connect to solar imagery. He systematically tried to burn himself out of existence, which is one reading of what someone does when the world hurts too much. N is one of the most genuinely principled characters in the franchise. His argument that Pokemon should be free, that the trainer-Pokemon relationship is inherently exploitative, is made with conviction and personal experience. He was raised by Pokemon. He can hear their thoughts. He believes what he says. Getsy's, who raised him, built that sincerity deliberately. The plan: if Team Plasma publicly advocates for Pokemon liberation, and if the public face of that advocacy is a young man who is a genuine king, who has the power to command legendary Pokemon, who transparently believes in what he's saying, people will listen. People will release their Pokemon. And if the general public releases their Pokemon, and only Team Plasma retains Pokemon, Team Plasma has a weapons monopoly. N's actual goodness was the mechanism of the plan. His sincerity was what made it work. Without a king who genuinely believed in liberation, Team Plasma would just be another criminal organization making arguments no one would accept. Getsy's found a child he could shape, raised him with carefully controlled care to make the shaping stick, and built a movement on the perceived authenticity of a person he'd manufactured. It's the darkest thing in the franchise, and the game presents it mostly through implication. Lysandra, Team Flare's leader in Gen 6, wants to use the ultimate weapon to reduce the world's population. The games present him as a villain, which he is, but the theory is about his diagnosis rather than his solution. He identifies resource scarcity, overpopulation, and conflict over finite goods as unsolvable problems within the current system. He's not wrong that these are real problems. He's wrong about the solution. Using an ancient weapon to kill most people is not a sustainable or ethical response to resource scarcity, and he'd lose everything that made peace meaningful. But the underlying analysis isn't irrational. The AZ story that runs beneath the main plot of X and Y is actually more interesting than Lysandra himself. 3,000 years before the game, a king named AZ used the ultimate weapon to end a war and bring back his dead Pokemon. He succeeded. He also devastated the region, lost everything he cared about, and has been walking the world in a kind of living death ever since. Lysandra saw himself as a new Acer, someone willing to do what was necessary. He missed the part where AZ didn't consider what came after. Chairman Rose, the antagonist of Sword and Shield, unleashes Eternatus on Galar during the climax of the game. He triggers the Darkest Day, a catastrophic release of energy that threatens to destroy everything, because he wants to generate enough power to secure Gala's future energy needs. He doesn't explain any of this to anyone in advance. He times it for the climax of the biggest sporting event of the year. He does have a backup plan if Eternatus doesn't cooperate. He's treated as a villain. He is a villain, but his theory is worth following. Rose predicted an energy crisis. He had a specific timeline, 1,000 years, and a specific solution, Eternatus's energy, and he acted on it. The problem wasn't his analysis. The problem was that he was so certain of the outcome that he didn't bother to consult anyone, didn't allow for the possibility that Eternatus wouldn't be controllable, and didn't consider that preventing a future crisis by creating an immediate catastrophic one might not, on balance, be a good trade. He's the most recognizable type of real-world villain, not malicious, just catastrophically arrogant. Someone who decided he was right, decided no one else needed to know, and caused a disaster that he genuinely believed was better than the alternative. The games treat him as a clear antagonist, but they also give him enough internal logic that he doesn't quite collapse under scrutiny. Team Skull in Alola presents itself as a threat. They steal Pokémon, block roads, do the swagger. The visual language of the gang, the music, the posturing, they're clearly designed to read as antagonists. But what Team Skull actually is, once you look at the lore, is a group of teenagers and young adults who failed their island trials and became social outcasts. The Alolan Island trial system is a rite of passage for young Pokémon trainers and a path to social recognition. If you fail, there's no obvious alternative. Team Skull is where people ended up when the system ran out of room for them. Their boss, Guzma, is a trial failure himself. His dialogue implies a history of being pressured to succeed, being told he wasn't good enough, and eventually finding his way to a group of other people who'd been told the same thing. He's not running a criminal empire, he's running a place where failure is allowed. Team Skull has no coherent plan. They steal some things, they make noise, they don't have a weapon or a legend or a vision for the world. They just exist, in an abandoned part of the island, somewhere the system forgot. The actual villain in Alola is the Ether Foundation, which is a whole other theory. The Ether Foundation is introduced as a Pokémon conservation charity. White uniforms, healing facilities, care for wild Pokémon who've been hurt. They look, on first impression, exactly like what they say they are. Lucamine, their president, is conducting experiments on Pokémon, cultivating an obsession with Ultra Beasts and treating her children, Lily and Gladion, in ways that Gladion felt the need to run away from, and Lily has suppressed the memory of. The theory. Ether is what happens when an organisation with genuinely good original intentions gets captured by one person's pathology, and everyone else either goes along with it or doesn't notice until too late. Lucamine's relationship with Pokémon mirrors her relationship with her children. She claims to love them, but what she's actually doing is controlling them, preserving them, refusing to let them be anything other than what she wants them to be. The Ultra Beasts she's obsessed with don't need her love. They need to be left alone. Her children don't need her protection. They need room to grow. The more uncomfortable reading of Lucamine's arc is that it's a recognisable story about someone who genuinely believes they're the good one. She's not performing care, she feels it, and the feeling is doing real damage to the people around her. In Scarlet and Violet, your professor is absent for most of the game. Their AI replica meets you instead, a program that has their memories and voice and personality, but isn't them. An AI copy of the professor is at the bottom of the Great Crater of Paldea in Area 0, maintaining the time machine they built. They have been there for some time. They are not coming back. They built the machine because they were obsessed, Sada with the ancient past, Turo with the far future, and they devoted their entire life's work to making it run. Their AI was created specifically to continue being present for their child's life, after they couldn't be. Arven's entire storyline in Scarlet and Violet is about this. His parent built something extraordinary, chose the thing they built over the life they'd been living, and left behind a copy that loves him the way his parent would have, but can't be his parent. The AI knows what it is. There are moments where it's clear the AI knows, and it continues anyway. The theory isn't hidden here. The game tells you most of this by the end. What it doesn't tell you is what the professor was feeling in those final years in Area 0, maintaining a machine in the dark at the bottom of a crater, sending a recorded version of themselves home to raise a child they couldn't reach. The most emotional thing in the franchise might be a Pokémon game released in 2022 that not everyone noticed was doing anything unusual. Volo is a merchant in Legends, Arceus, ostensibly from the Ginkgo Guild, travelling ancient Hisui and learning the myths of the region. He is also the hidden villain of the game, revealed at the end to have been manipulating events toward his goal of confronting and overpowering Arceus. When he's defeated, he leaves with a specific promise. He will achieve his goal, even if it takes centuries. In Scarlet and Violet, the lore of the Ruinous Quartet describes 4 ancient Pokémon, vessels of fear, malice, grudges, and greed, whose cursed treasures were sold to the King of Paldea by a merchant from the east. Volo came from the east. He is a merchant. He explicitly committed to a centuries-long plan of revenge against the world for refusing to give him Arceus. He has no stated limits on his methods. The theory, Volo, at some point in the centuries between legends, Arceus and the Paldean era, found or created the 4 vessels of the Ruinous Quartet and sold them to the Paldean king, knowing exactly what he was selling and knowing what it would eventually cause. One more act of destruction directed at a world that wouldn't give him what he wanted. Game Freak has never confirmed this, but a merchant from the east sold these terrible things to a king is quite specific, and Volo is quite specifically a merchant from the east with very bad intentions and unlimited time. Speaking of things that have unlimited time, let's talk about ghost Pokémon. The Pokémon world has always been surprisingly candid about death, not in a graphic way, but in the way it acknowledges that things end, that endings leave marks, and that what remains after something ends is its own particular kind of thing. Ghost-type Pokémon are where most of this honesty collects. The Pokémon Tower in Lavender Town is a graveyard. When you enter it for the first time in Gen 1, there's a ghost on one of the upper floors that attacks you. Formless, unidentifiable, impossible to catch. Without the Sylph Scope, you can't even see what Pokémon it really is. With the Sylph Scope, you can see that it's a Marowak, a wild Marowak. Level 30, not a trainer's Pokémon. Just a Pokémon that lived in or near Lavender Town that Team Rocket killed. This is the only confirmed on-screen death of a wild Pokémon at human hands in the entire Gen 1 game. Team Rocket killed it, presumably to get past it, or as part of whatever they were doing in the tower, and the ghost has been there ever since, guarding the upper floors from the organisation that killed her. She can't leave. She doesn't leave. The implication is that her child is still out there somewhere. Kubone's whole lore is about wearing its dead mother's skull, but she can't get back to it because the building is between her and the town. What makes this moment work is that the game doesn't comment on it. It doesn't call it murder. It doesn't give her a name. It shows you what the Sylph Scope reveals and continues. The gravity of what happened is left entirely to the player to feel. The creepypasta version of Lavender Town Syndrome, children in Japan dying by suicide after hearing the original music, mass hospitalization events caused by hidden binaural tones, is fiction. It didn't happen. The story was created online and spread because it was compelling and because the music is genuinely unsettling enough that the fiction felt credible. The real history is more interesting and more credible. The original Lavender Town music in the Japanese release of Red and Green, the February 1996 version, was different from the music that appeared in all subsequent releases. It's more dissonant, more unusual, structured differently from the replaced version. Game Freak received enough complaints from players about physical discomfort associated with the track, headaches, ear pain, unease, that the music was changed before the international release. The change happened. The complaints happened. What precisely the complaints described, how many there were, what medical interpretation accompanied them. That's where the documentation gets thin and the legend expands into the gaps. The theory that sits in the established facts. The original music was genuinely unusual in a way that produced real physiological responses in some players, particularly children, and the developer responded by removing it. Everything else attached to that story, the creepypasta elements, grew up around the documented reality of the music being changed, which is actually more interesting. A real thing happened, mostly undocumented, and the community built a mythology around it. When a Pokémon's HP reaches 0 in battle, it faints. It's revived with a trip to the Pokémon Center or the use of a revive item. The abstraction is clean, child-appropriate, and consistent across every game. The theory is about what the abstraction is covering. The Pokédex describes attacks that cause internal injuries, wounds that never heal, moves that inflict paralysis. The anime shows Pokémon being hospitalized, struggling to recover, suffering in ways that take time and care to address. Wild Pokémon battles, implied in the lore, don't come with automatic revives. In a battle without a trainer watching, without a Pokémon Center nearby, without the game's abstraction operating, what does reaching 0 HP look like? The franchise has been deliberately careful not to answer this. The games need the abstraction to function. A game where a Pokémon's defeat is treated realistically would be unplayable and almost certainly wouldn't be rated E. But the decision not to look too closely at what fainting covers isn't accidental. It's a choice the franchise has been renewing every generation. What the abstraction covers is left to interpretation. The lore suggests it covers a range that gets uncomfortable quickly. Gengar's design reads, if you look at it from the right angle, as a shadow that has taken on mass. Wide grin, round body, stubby reaching arms. It looks like the silhouette of a person who's mostly made of darkness. At least one Pokédex entry for Gengar supports a human origin. The silver entry. Under a full moon, this Pokémon likes to mimic the shadows of people and laugh at their fright. The fire red entry. It is said to emerge from darkness to steal the lives of those who become lost in mountains. The Canalave library, the text from Diamond and Pearl about humans and Pokémon once being the same, is the most direct support. If the distinction between the two was once absent, then a human who died under the right circumstances becoming a ghost-type Pokémon is not a stretch. The theory, Gengar is the ghost of a human, specifically the ghost of a human who died somewhere cold and dark and has been trying to find warmth ever since. Gengar's signature effect on entering a room is a sudden drop in temperature. Multiple entries describe it chilling the air wherever it appears. Cold is what death left it with, and the only warmth available is borrowed from the living things nearby, which is why it keeps finding them. It's a sad reading of a Pokémon that's usually played for mischief, but it fits. Spiritom's Pokédex is fairly direct about its origin. Formed from 108 spirits, sealed inside a strange stone called the Odd Keystone, as punishment for misdeeds committed 500 years before the game is set. 108 is a significant number in Japanese Buddhist tradition. It corresponds to the 108 earthly desires, the causes of human suffering. Some Buddhist traditions ring a bell 108 times at the new year to symbolically expel each one. I find this one of the more interesting bits of world building in the franchise because it implies that whoever sealed Spiritomb was operating within a specific theological framework. They didn't just imprison 108 bad people, they fused them together into a manifestation of the concept those 108 sins represent. To encounter Spiritomb in Diamond and Pearl, you have to speak to 32 people underground, essentially gathering spiritual weight to dislodge whatever was keeping the seal closed. The game presents this as an encounter puzzle. The lore suggests you've just released a prison containing the crystallized sins of half a medieval village. Whether the souls inside are aware, or whether they've merged into something that transcends individual awareness, after 5 centuries, the entries don't say. Spiritomb's Pokédex entries state it was formed by 108 malevolent spirits, and was bound to an odd keystone as punishment for its misdeeds. Giratina's realm, called the Distortion World in Platinum, sometimes referred to as the Reverse World in other media, is a dimension that runs anti-parallel to the regular world. Physics behaves differently there. It's where Giratina was banished by Arceus for its violent, destructive behaviour. The theory, the Distortion World is where the dead go. The supporting logic, it's a place that mirrors the living world but operates on different rules. It's where things that don't belong in the regular world end up. Giratina is there as punishment. But what defines the dimension isn't the punishment, it's the reversal, the anti-world. the place that exists precisely because the regular world exists, as its negative. Looker's descriptions of the distortion world in Platinum use language associated with liminal space, a place between worlds, undefined and constantly shifting. Many cultural traditions describe death as a threshold state, a between place. The Pokemon Tower is where deceased Pokemon are buried. Yamask and Phantump are spirits that haven't moved on. And Gengar is a ghost-type Pokemon linked to the dead, but not clearly a lingering spirit. The question of where they eventually go, if they go anywhere, is one the games have never directly answered. But the distortion world is already there, already defined as the place for things that can't exist in the regular world. It fits the description. Darkrai's reputation is terrible. It gives nightmares to those around it on moonless nights. The Moon entry mentions a Darkrai made a small child cry from its nightmares. There's no ambiguity about what Darkrai does, but the Diamond entry adds something that changes the framing. It can lull people to sleep and make them dream. Not toward it, Darkrai isn't hunting people. It's doing the only thing available to it to keep people away. Because people near Darkrai get nightmares, and Darkrai doesn't know how to stop this from happening. The nightmares aren't a weapon, they're a condition, one that it's learned to direct, because directing is the only option. New Moon Island, where Darkrai is found in Sinnoh, is isolated, not hidden, just alone. Far enough from everything that Darkrai's effect reaches no one. It's not hiding, it's just somewhere that the distance works. The Lunar Wing, which dispels Darkrai's nightmares, is associated with Cresselia, its natural counterpart. They're portrayed as a pair, which means someone, at the level of the world's design, built a cure for Darkrai's effect, which implies they understood the effect wasn't something Darkrai was doing on purpose. Froslas's Heart Gold Pokédex entry. Legends in snowy regions say that a woman who was lost on an icy mountain was reborn as Froslas. Its Platinum Pokédex entry says it secretly displays its frozen prey. It is said to then secretly display its frozen prey. She doesn't just kill, she displays, secretly, in her own space. The theory, Froslas doesn't kill randomly, she specifically pursues things she finds beautiful, people, Pokemon, things, and preserves them. She is building a collection, which makes the framing very strange. Some Pokédex entries describe Froslas as the ghost of a woman who died on a mountain, while others only talk about its icy hunting. What she became is a creature that takes beautiful things and keeps them. Whether this is some echo of who she was before, someone who collected, who preserved, who valued beauty, is not addressed. But the behaviour is specific enough that random predator doesn't quite cover it. There's also this, Froslas is frozen herself in a sense. She is the preservation of a person at the moment of their death on a cold mountain. She preserves other things too. It might be all she knows how to do. Marshado's Sun Pokédex. It slips into the shadows of others and mimics their powers and movements. Moon. It lurks in the shadows of others. Marshado is a mythical Pokemon whose Pokédex entries describe it living in shadows and stealing the power of any Pokemon whose shadow it sinks into or possesses, possibly including yours. The theory, Marshado was following the player character throughout the game, watching every battle, learning every move, collecting data. By the time you actually encounter it as a special event Pokemon, it has watched everything you've done, every strategy, every team choice, every moment of the game. It knows your style completely. This explains why Marshado can copy moves precisely. It's been practicing. The shadow it occupies isn't a physical space so much as a position of undetectable proximity to someone whose powers it finds interesting. The implication being that there's been a small, intensely focused ghost Pokemon in the corner of every battle you've ever had, taking notes, and you never noticed. We visited Shedinja briefly in the context of what Pokemon actually are. I want to come back to it from a different angle. Most ghost-type Pokemon represent something that died. A person, an animal, an emotion, an experience. They're the aftermath of death, the residue. Shedinja is different. It didn't die. It's the empty space left by something that moved on. The shed shell, the discarded outer layer, that somehow retained enough of whatever made Nincada alive to continue. Not to live, to continue. Wonder Guard doesn't protect Shedinja because it's strong. It protects Shedinja because there's nothing to damage. Wonder Guard makes most attacks that aren't super effective just pass right through it. There's nothing inside to hit. The hole in its back, the one you're told not to look into, the one that takes your soul, is the only honest part. The shell is hollow. The hole goes all the way through, and whatever is on the other side of it is the thing the Pokédex doesn't want you to find. Shedinja isn't a Pokémon that died. It's the shape of one that left. Those are the ghosts. Now for the things older than ghosts. Legendary Pokémon are the franchise's mythology. They're the creation stories, the nature deities, the cosmic forces. Most players encounter them as extremely rare Pokémon that require very specific balls and strategies to catch. The lore behind them is often much stranger than the catching mechanic suggests. Arceus, the god of the Pokémon universe, according to Gen 4's mythology, is described in its Pokédex as the Pokémon that shaped the universe with its 1,000 arms. Arceus has no arms. This has been sitting in the Pokédex since Diamond and Pearl, with no official explanation. The theory, with the most traction, the 1,000 arms, are the unknown. The unknown are a collection of Pokémon that resemble letters of an alphabet, plus punctuation marks. There are 28 forms of them in total, and while that's not 1,000, the theory doesn't require a literal count. In Gen 4 film lore and Heart Gold and Soul Silver events, Unone are tied to ancient ruins and dimensional lore, but do not explicitly appear in the on-screen dimensions associated with Dialga, Palkia and Giratina. One HGSS event shows them swirling around Arceus as it creates a new legendary. The deeper theory, the unknown, are the base code of the Pokémon world's reality. They're the alphabet from which existence is written. Arceus doesn't have arms because Arceus doesn't need them. The unknown are its arms, its hands, its tools, capable of warping reality and encoding information into the world. What shaping the universe with 1,000 arms looks like, if the arms are letters, is Arceus wrote the universe, literally. Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf, the lake guardians of Sinnoh, embody knowledge, emotion, and willpower, respectively. They live in separate lakes, guard the lake ruins, and are eventually relevant to Cyrus's plan in Diamond and Pearl because he wants to extract their power. The standard reading, they're the givers of these qualities to humanity. Arceus created them and through them bestowed the capacities for knowing, feeling, and acting on living things. The theory, they aren't gifts, they're reserves. The idea being that Arceus created the Lake Trio not to distribute these qualities to humanity, but to preserve them. If something catastrophic happened, if a civilization destroyed its own capacity for knowledge, or exhausted its emotional reserves, or lost its collective will, the Lake Trio would still hold it. They're not patrons, they're a backup system. The knowledge Uxie holds isn't available to humanity in any direct way. Mesprit doesn't give emotions, Azelf doesn't grant willpower. They're repositories, kept separate, hidden in their respective lakes, in case they're needed. Which reframes what it means that Cyrus wanted to extract their power. He wasn't trying to steal gifts, he was trying to drain the emergency supply. 3 things about the Regi Trio. They have no internal organs, no heartbeat, and Regirock is specifically described as having no brain. They're animated matter. They don't think, they just act. That's not what Pokemon usually are. Most Pokemon feel things. Most have relationships and personalities and preferences. The Regis have none of that. They're sealed in chambers behind puzzles, accessed by solving codes, and when you release them, they don't seem to react to freedom, in any way a living thing would. They were built. That's what most people who look at the law eventually conclude. Reiji Gigas, their master, is described as having towed continents with ropes and created the Reiji trio. The mythology surrounding Reiji Gigas implies a civilization that could reshape geography and construct weapons on a geological scale. The seals on the chambers, elaborate, specific, requiring knowledge to open, suggest that same civilization eventually decided these constructs should stay locked away. Something happened. Whatever these were built for, the people who built them looked at what they'd made and chose to seal it in 3 separate locations, in 3 separate climate extremes, and forget the codes. Snow Point Temple in Sinnoh houses Reiji Gigas, sealed even more thoroughly than the 3 it created, which suggests the parent was the problem all along. Sigard is first encountered in X and Y in an underground cave at level 70, apparently doing nothing. Its lore, it monitors the Carlos ecosystem and assembles its cells into stronger forms as threats to that ecosystem intensify. At 50%, it's a serpent. At 100%, it's a massive creature that could theoretically override both Xerneas and Evil Tal. In X and Y, the threat to Carlos is substantial. Lysandra activates the ultimate weapon. The region nearly ends. Zigarda never stirs. The theory: Zigard didn't act during the events of X and Y because the heroes were sufficient. The threat reached a certain level, the game's entire main plot, and Zigard assessed it and judged that the situation was being handled. This raises a question about what would actually require Zigard to go to 100%. The answer, implied by its moveset and description, is something considerably worse than a scientist with an ancient superweapon. The sleeping guardian who hasn't moved is more unsettling than the one who has, because it implies a threshold. Zigarda has one. Whatever would cross it is larger than anything the franchise has shown, and it's out there in Terminus Cave in Kalos, waiting for the thing that finally makes intervention necessary. This is in the Pokédex, explicitly, not implied, stated. Volcarona's Black Entry. When volcanic ash darkened the atmosphere, it is said that Volcarona's fire provided a replacement for the sun. A moth with 6 wings full of fire. That literally served as the sun during a period when a volcanic event covered the sky. The relic castle in Unova is an ancient ruin, deep in the desert, and at its lowest level, there's a Volcarona. Just there, sitting at the bottom of an archaeological site, waiting. The theory: Volcarona isn't at the relic castle by coincidence. It's there because it was there during the volcanic event, because it stayed, because being the replacement sun was its function, and the function isn't finished. The threat could return. The desert around the relic castle is the driest, hottest region in Unova. Whether that's a consequence of Volcarona's presence, or just geography, the game doesn't say. What it does say is that a moth held the sky together when everything else failed. And the moth is still there, at the bottom of the place where it did that. The Tapus are the island guardians of Alola. The entire regional culture is built around them. Trials are held in their honour. The social structure of 4 separate island communities is organised around the assumption that these Pokémon are benevolent. And then Tapu Lele's Pokédex entry says, it heals the wounds of people and Pokémon by sprinkling them with its sparkling scales. However, since it has a cruel streak, it may heal them only to inflict wounds again, which is quite something for an object of religious devotion to be doing. The other Tapus aren't much clearer. Tapu Bulu causes vegetation to grow and then absorbs energy from the growth, while Tapu Koko summons thunderclouds and stores the lightning in its shell to transform it into power. Tapu Fini generates mist so dense it causes people to lose their minds. The thing is, none of this makes the Tapus villains. It makes them indifferent. They protect their islands. Humans live on those islands. When the interests of island and human align, the Tapus help. When they diverge, they don't. and Tapu Lele might heal you with its scales, while remaining guiltlessly cruel and indifferent to whatever pain it causes. Alola has built an entire civilization of reverence around creatures that are, at best, occasionally interested in human well-being, which is a fairly honest representation of how most actual nature deities work, if you read the original mythologies rather than the cleaned-up versions. The Ultra-Megalopolis is a city in ultra-space where the sun is gone. A great tower, the Megalo Tower, sits in the centre of a darkened metropolis. The Ultra Recon Squad, the people you encounter, come from this place. They've been in darkness for generations. Necrozma stole the light. This is stated in Sun and Moon, though the details require some piecing together. Necrozma, the prism Pokémon, was once a source of light, an entity that gave energy freely. Something happened to it. The Pokédex describes it as having been wounded in a long-ago battle and being unable to maintain its light output as a result. So it takes light instead of giving it. The Ultra-Megalopolis was the civilization that Necrozma was closest to. When it started consuming rather than generating, the Ultra-Megalopolis was the first place it drew from. Their sun, Necrozma itself, or something Necrozma was powering, went out, and the civilization has been in darkness since. The Ultra Recon Squad is a group from that civilization, still trying to get their light back. They've been operating in darkness long enough that it's become normal. The theory is mostly there in the lore. The part it adds is the scale of what was lost, not just light. A whole civilization's relationship with warmth and growing things, and the day-night cycle removed. Because an entity that used to give was hurt badly enough that it could only take. Calyrex is a tiny legendary Pokémon who, according to the Crown Tundra lore, once ruled over the region. It's the size of something that wouldn't be imposing in a fight. It has enormous ears and a kind expression, and essentially no presence in the modern Pokémon world. One old man in the Crown Tundra remembers it. He's the only one. The theory: Calyrex is a meditation on what happens to authority after its time ends. Not death, it's still alive, but the specific loss of being a king in a world that has stopped recognizing the kingship. It needs you to help it reconnect with its two legendary steeds, Glastria and Spectria, which abandoned it long ago when its power faded and its relevance ended. Without them, it's powerless. Without the steeds, the king is just a small creature with a crown that doesn't mean anything anymore. The bittersweet part: after you help it, Calyrex is still small, still largely forgotten, still living in a Crown Tundra that has built an entire culture around different legends entirely. You restore it to something like what it was, and then the world continues without particularly noticing. There's a very human story in a tiny legendary deer. It's the story of anyone who was important once and has had to figure out what to be after that. The four treasures of ruin in Paldea, Tinglu, Qianpao, Woqian and Qiyu, representing fear, hatred, grudges and envy, are ancient Pokémon sealed in shrines around the region. Their origin: a long ago Paldean king received 4 gift items: a bowl, 2 swords, wooden tablets and glass beads. The gifts were given with intense emotions attached. Enough people felt enough fear, enough malice, enough grudges, enough greed in connection with these objects that the emotions accumulated, crystallized, and eventually became the things that wear those vessels. The part of this I find most interesting is the direction. The emotions didn't come from the king. They came from everyone around him: subjects, enemies, people who gave and received those gifts over decades. The Ruinous Quartet aren't what the king felt. They're what a whole kingdom felt about the king, which means the things you're sealing away when you encounter them aren't entities that came from outside. They grew in place. They're what the history of the region generated and then had to be contained. The king is long dead. The emotions outlasted him. That's not a unique observation. It's true of most kingdoms and most histories. What's unusual is that in Paldea the emotions became visible, and they're still in the shrines, and you can go and fight them if you feel like it. Coridon, scarlet, is the ancient form. Biological, muscular, built like something from deep prehistory. Miraidon, violet, is the future form. Sleek, mechanical, powered by electricity. They have the same base stat total, distributed differently between power and speed. They share an underlying design. In the game's endgame, you encounter a second one that came through the time machine from the past or future, respectively. The theory: Coridon and Miraidon aren't just related species. They're the same individual from different timelines. In one timeline, whatever Pokemon they both descended from evolved along biological lines, becoming more powerful, more physically dominant, shaped by nature. In another, it evolved alongside technology, became part machine, traded raw power for precision. The two forms being present in the same game, interacting with each other, is the franchise's clearest statement of its paradox Pokemon concept. The same origin, diverging across time into two entirely different expressions of what a thing can be. The motorcycle they each become when you ride them is, in this reading, the same basic shape, the same vehicle, arrived at through completely different means, biology and machinery converging on the same form. Now for the theories about what the game is actually doing mechanically, because a surprising amount of the lore lives in the systems. The Pokemon games are built on systems. PC storage, HM moves, the daycare, wild item mechanics. These systems are presented as tools. They're how you play the game. But applied to the in-world logic that the rest of the franchise establishes, some of them raise questions that the games deliberately don't follow. Bill, Professor Bill, the eccentric inventor, once accidentally merged himself with a Pokemon while testing an early version of his transport system. This is confirmed in Gen 1 dialogue. He stood there as a man-shaped Pokemon and had to ask you to reverse the process. The system he eventually perfected, the PC storage box, converts Pokemon to data and holds them indefinitely. This is presented as a filing cabinet. A convenient tool. What I find myself wondering, fairly often actually, is what that's like for the Pokemon. The games never address this. A Pokemon deposited in the PC stops being part of the active story. It waits. Whether this represents a pause in the Pokemon's subjective experience, or a continuity of experience with nothing happening, is a question the franchise has been careful never to answer. Competitive players might have hundreds of Pokemon in boxes at any given time. Some were bred specifically for a purpose and rejected for not meeting the statistical requirements. Some have been in those boxes for years. The franchise establishes that Pokemon are individuals with personalities, relationships, and emotional histories. And then it provides infinite storage for them and moves on. Hidden machines, HM moves that Pokemon learn to navigate the world, are among the franchise's most distinctive mechanics. And they raise some questions when you think about what they're describing. HM Cut. A Pokemon uses its body to slice through a small tree, blocking a path. Required navigation in Gen 1 through 6. Your Pokemon is literally using its limbs or mouth or other body parts to remove obstacles. HM Surf. A Pokemon carries you across open water. The game lets you assign this to any Pokemon in your party that's compatible, including a Haunter or a Snorlax, or whatever else is at hand. HM Fly. A Pokemon carries you through the sky at apparent high speed to any destination you've previously visited, instantly. The theory. HM moves in the game represent a world where Pokemon are regularly used for physical labour in ways that the partnership framing around the franchise tends to soften. Surf specifically asks the player to choose which Pokemon carries them based on mechanical compatibility rather than any sense of the Pokemon's preferences. The transition away from HM moves in later games, replaced by Ride Pokemon, Rotom Bike, Pokeride, and other mechanics that don't require a team member to learn a specific move, was presented as a quality of life improvement. Whether it was also quietly acknowledging something uncomfortable about the old system, only Game Freak knows. The Safari Zone in Kanto is a wildlife reserve, a fenced area where rare Pokémon live, protected from the wider world, maintained by a warden. You pay an entrance fee, walk around, and try to catch the Pokémon inside. The setup is presented as benign. Conservation. The theory? The Safari Zone is a private hunting reserve dressed up as conservation. The Pokémon inside are kept there. They can't leave, for the benefit of paying trainers who want to catch them. The warden controls access. The Pokémon didn't choose to be there. The mechanics reinforce this. Safari Zone Pokémon are notably harder to catch than wild Pokémon encountered in normal routes. They flee more readily. They resist. Whether this is because they're rare species or because they've been in an enclosure long enough to distrust humans, who come specifically to catch them, is a question the game never surfaces. The later generations have tried various approaches to make catching Pokémon feel more like collaboration and less like capture. The Safari Zone, in its original form, is about as far from that as the franchise gets. Most players save their Master Ball. For the legendary they're most worried about losing. Something that flees or that has very little HP before fainting, or that they've already failed to catch twice. The Master Ball guarantees it. No battle, no failed throws, no the wild Pokémon fled. It's the ultimate Pokeball. Game Freak has included it in every mainline game since Gen 1, and I find it interesting that this is what ultimate means in the franchise's logic. Every other capture involves something first. A battle, a wearing down, some form of exchange. The Pokémon experiences something. You demonstrate something. There's at least a nominal back and forth before the ball is thrown. The Master Ball removes even that. It's immediate, unconditional, and irresistible. The franchise has, across the years, moved increasingly toward framing the trainer-Pokémon relationship as mutual. Partnership mechanics, friendship systems, an entire Gen 5 dedicated to questioning whether catching Pokémon is ethical. And sitting quietly in the bag this whole time has been the Master Ball, which is what happens when you remove the question entirely. The daycare accepts two Pokémon, leaves them together, and eventually produces an egg. The daycare workers describe the Pokémon as getting along, or not, in vague terms. The egg appears as if out of nowhere in the worker's description, which is the franchise's consistent and clearly deliberate way of not describing what actually happened. Pokémon can breed across wildly different species if they share an egg group, a category defined by biological compatibility. The egg groups themselves are named things like monster, field, and human-like, which is its own set of implications. Ditto can breed with almost any Pokémon. The game presents this as mechanically useful and moves on. The theory isn't that anything sinister is happening, it's that the daycare mechanic represents the franchise's most explicit decision not to look too closely at what its systems imply. The egg group system was clearly designed for the breeding mechanic to work cleanly, and the as-if-out-of-nowhere language in the daycare dialogue is clearly designed to give the player permission not to ask questions. For a franchise that spends considerable energy on the emotional lives of Pokémon, the daycare is the one place where the invitation to think carefully about what's happening is most visibly withdrawn. This one is less a theory and more a documented piece of franchise history that hasn't received the correction it deserves. In December 1997, an episode of the Pokémon anime called Den-o Senshi Porygon, Computer Warrior Porygon in the common translation, aired in Japan. During a sequence involving a virtual world, rapidly flashing red and blue lights appeared on screen for several seconds. Approximately 685 Japanese viewers were taken to hospitals with symptoms associated with photosensitive epilepsy after the episode aired, and hundreds more reported discomfort. The episode was pulled immediately and has never been rebroadcast. The flashing lights in the sequence were caused by a Pikachu attack. Porygon appeared in the episode, but was not the cause of the event. Porygon has never appeared in a main series anime episode since. Its two evolutions, Porygon 2 and Porygon Z, have also never appeared. The episode that caused the hospitalization was Porygon's only anime appearance, and the blame, whether explicitly or implicitly, attached to it. Porygon 2 was introduced in Gen 2, Porygon Z in Gen 4. Both received Pokédex entries, competitive viability, and full game representation. The anime simply doesn't include Porygon 2 in any episode or movie, and only gives Porygon Z a brief cameo in a movie opening. 27 years, all three of them, for something Pikachu did. Pokerus is a rare viral condition that Pokémon can contract and spread to others. When infected, a Pokémon gains effort values at double the normal rate. The infection lasts a few days and then becomes dormant. The Pokémon keeps the benefit without remaining contagious. When the Pokémon Center nurse in Gen 2 first detects it, she's visibly alarmed. Then she explains that it's beneficial and that everything is fine. The theory, her initial alarm, is the honest response, and that everything is fine is the result of a medical community that has assessed the situation and decided the benefits outweigh the concerns. Pokerus comes from somewhere. The games don't say where. It spreads between party Pokémon after battles. It improves performance in ways that are measurable and consistent. In any normal biological context, a virus with these characteristics would be extensively studied, carefully documented, and probably controversial. In the Pokémon world, the nurse was alarmed for a moment. The franchise decided to make it a beneficial mechanic, and nobody asks questions anymore, which is either the simplest resolution to a strange detail or a very small window into a world that has had to normalize some very unusual things. Wonder Trade, introduced in Gen 6, allows any player to trade any Pokémon blindly with a random other player globally. You send something, you receive something. You don't know what you'll get until it arrives. The theory is about what this system became rather than what it was designed to be. Competitive Pokémon breeding is an intensive process. To get a Pokémon with the right combination of individual values, nature, and ability for competitive play, a breeder might produce hundreds of offspring and keep only a few. The others need to go somewhere. Wonder Trade became where they go. The endless stream of unevolved, low-level Pokémon that fills Wonder Trade, the Bidoof, the Caterpie, the Magikarp, is in large part the overflow from a competitive economy that generates vastly more Pokémon than it needs. And somewhere in that stream, a new player sends in a starter and receives a fully trained competitive Pokémon from a breeder clearing space and thinks the game has been unexpectedly generous to them. It wasn't designed, the players made it. Wonder Trade created a redistribution economy out of waste, entirely organically, and the only question it raises is who decides that a perfect IV sizer goes to a random new player in Southeast Asia and a Bidoof goes to a veteran in the UK. Nobody decides, it just happens. N's argument in Black and White is that the trainer-Pokémon relationship is inherently exploitative, that putting Pokémon in Pokéballs and using them in battles treats them as tools rather than as beings with their own interests. By the end of the game, he acknowledges that some relationships between trainers and Pokémon seem genuinely different. He concedes the point partially. The theory, competitive breeding, is the part of the franchise that N was right about, and the parts the franchise consistently avoids looking at directly. To get a competitively viable Pokémon, you usually breed batch after batch until one has the right stats, though newer training items and mechanics can also get you there instead, or alongside breeding. The Pokémon that don't have the right stats get sent to Wonder Trade, released or stored indefinitely. The ones that do get trained to fulfill a function. This is a system in which Pokémon are assessed for the utility of their random number generation at birth, discarded if they don't meet the requirement, and if they do, trained to fill a specific role. N's argument about Pokémon as tools is most visible here, in the part of the game that the main story never mentions. The franchise hasn't addressed this. The competitive community exists alongside the friendship and partnership framing, and the two coexist without the games requiring you to reconcile them. In Gen 2, shiny Pokémon existed in the game files, with their encounter rate effectively defined by DVs at 1 in 8192, while Gen 1 had no shiny mechanic at all. They were just Pokémon with alternate palettes that appeared rarely. Gen 2 formalized shininess as a mechanical property tied to a Pokémon's stats in a specific combination. The result was an encounter rate that worked out to approximately 1 in 8,000. Gen 6 halved the encounter rate, bringing it to approximately 1 in 4,096. The theory, the encounter rate change in Gen 6 wasn't just a quality of life adjustment. It was a response to the community's relationship with shiny Pokémon having changed dramatically because of the internet. Before community resources made shiny hunting viable, the encounter rates were abstract. Most players never encountered a shiny at all. After communities formed around tracking shiny encounters, sharing methods, documenting odds, the rate became something players actively worked with. The change in Gen 6 acknowledged that the franchise's relationship with its own systems had changed because players were now engaging with them deliberately, which is less a theory about in-world lore and more a theory about the franchise's relationship to its community and how the community changes what the game becomes. Those are the mechanics. Now for the more recent theories, the ones from the last few generations that the community is still working through. The franchise has been doing increasingly interesting things with its lore since Gen 5. The early games had compelling details buried in the edges. The more recent ones have moved some of that toward the centre, putting the uncomfortable implications into the main story rather than into the margins. We touched on the Mega Evolution Pokédex entries in Section 1. The descriptions of pain, destabilization, and psychological deterioration that run through almost every megaform. But the theory's deeper version is about what happened to Mega Evolution as a mechanic. It was introduced in Gen 6 X and Y with significant fanfare. It appeared in Gen 7, Sun and Moon, with less emphasis but was still present. It was entirely absent from Gen 8, Sword and Shield, and has not returned to any mainline game since. Game Freak has never explained this removal. The standard assumption is that Mega Evolution was replaced by Dynamax, and then by Terastallization, different power mechanics for different generations. But the in-world explanation, if you're looking for one, is in the Pokédex entries themselves. A mechanic defined, entry by entry, as painful, destabilizing, and in some cases sanity eroding, was quietly removed after 7 generations. The competitive community didn't vanish. Players weren't asking for it to go, but it went. The theory? Someone at Game Freak read the Mega Evolution entries they'd written and noticed that the lore and the friendship and partnership framing had diverged in a way that was difficult to paper over. Mega Gyarados doesn't have a partnership with anyone while it's in Mega form. It's just destruction. And the other entries are not much better. Dynamax is bigger. Terastallization changes type. Neither of them is described as painful. Ultra Beasts look wrong. Not in a poor design way, in a deliberate, precise way. They're angular where Pokémon are usually rounded. Their proportions don't follow the same logic. They use design elements that regular Pokémon avoid. Hard right angles, exposed mechanisms, shapes that seem to repeat a single principle to an extreme. Buzzwole is a mass of muscle that flexes and pulverizes foes with its incredible strength. Nihilego is a repeating structure that tapers to nothing. Guzzlord is a mouth with the vestigial limbs attached. Celestiella seems to have been growing for an extremely long time. The reading I find most interesting. Ultra Beasts are what Pokémon look like in dimensions where evolution picked one answer and committed to it. The regular Pokémon world has extraordinary biodiversity. Ultra space dimensions, from what the games show, tend to have very few dominant species. One type of creature that's absorbed or replaced everything else, and then kept optimizing on that single template. Buzzwole kept getting stronger, Nihilego kept parasitizing, Guzzlord kept consuming, Celesteela kept growing. Without the pressure of other species to balance against, there was nothing to check the commitment. The Pokemon world is what diversity looks like. Ultra space is what happens when you remove it. Nihilego is an ultra beast that resembles a young girl made of glass, and it is a parasite. Its Pokédex entries describe a venom that elicits a feeling of omnipotence in the host, a neurochemical high produced by the infection. Lusamine in Sun and Moon is obsessed with ultra beasts. She has been working with them, studying them, and eventually merges with one in the game's climax. The merger corrupts her and makes her the final boss. The theory: Lusamine's obsession predates the game's events. She encountered Nihilego earlier, possibly once, possibly several times, and the venom left a residue, a craving. Her behaviour in the game, the controlling relationship with her children, the obsessive cataloguing of beautiful things, the willingness to destroy her own family and organisation in pursuit of her goal, reads differently if the goal is partly driven by a neurochemical dependency she doesn't recognise or name. The post-game Lusamine is struggling. She's disconnected from what she cared about before. Her relationship with her children is damaged in ways that take time to repair. Whether the game intends this as the aftermath of trauma or as withdrawal is unclear. But the two readings produce the same observable behaviour. In Sword and Shield, the Darkest Day is a catastrophic event in which Eternatus releases energy and causes Pokemon throughout Galar to Dynamax uncontrollably. Zacian and Zamazenta stopped it 3,000 years ago. Leon almost doesn't stop it now. The game presents the Darkest Day as cyclical. The lore says it happened before, it happened again, and it will presumably happen again if Eternatus wakes and nobody is ready. The theory extends this. The 3,000-year gap isn't special. It's just how long Eternatus needed to recover after being sealed. The Darkest Day is an event that happens whenever Eternatus's energy reserves reach a certain threshold after a period of dormancy. This means it's not a villain's scheme or a natural disaster in the usual sense. It's a biological process of a creature that the planet cannot contain. Like a geological event on a very long timer, the ancient heroes 3,000 years ago didn't understand what they were dealing with. Chairman Rose thought he could harness its energy. The player character stops it again, but the question the theory leaves open is, in another 3,000 years, who will there be to stop it the next time? At the end of Scarlet and Violet, after the player defeats the AI professor and completes the main story, the game continues. The endgame is set in Paldea. Life continues. The time machine in Area Zero is not addressed as being shut down. The AI professor's purpose, maintaining the machine, presumably continues. Paradox Pokemon continue to emerge from the crater. The theory, Area Zero is an open wound in the Paldea region's timeline that nobody announced any plan to close. More Paradox Pokemon will continue appearing. The ecosystem of the crater, already unlike anything else in the region, will continue to shift. Without the professor to manage the machine, without any character the game assigns the task of oversight to, the machine presumably keeps operating on whatever directives the original professor programmed. The theory isn't alarming exactly. It's more the kind of thing where you finish a game and then, a few days later, think, wait, who's watching that? The Scarlet Paradox Pokemon, the ancient, primal, pre-civilization forms, and the Violet Paradox Pokemon, the sleek, mechanical, far-future forms, both emerge from Area Zero. Both are described as coming from different eras. The theory? They don't come from the same future and past. They come from different timelines entirely. In one timeline, Pokemon evolved alongside nature and became more powerful natural organisms. In another, they evolved alongside technology and became integrated with machinery. These aren't the same world at different time points. They're different worlds that diverged at some point in the past and are now both being accessed by the same device. Supporting this, Suicune has a paradox form in Scarlet, Walking Wake, Ancient and Primal, and Viridian has a future form in Violet, Iron Leaves has its equivalents. These forms represent different evolutionary paths that Suicune doesn't take in the main timeline. The paradox Pokémon aren't previews or history, they're alternatives. Terrapagos is the legendary Pokémon of the Indigo Disc DLC for Scarlet and Violet. It's a small turtle-like Pokémon that, when it terrestrializes, becomes enormous, a shining celestial form that fills the room. The theory, Terrapagos is the Pokémon equivalent of the world turtle mythology, and specifically, Paldea is built on its back. The map of Paldea, viewed from above, looks like a turtle. The southwestern corner is where the head would be, and that corner of the map is, notably, where the Paldean coast curves exactly the way a turtle's head pokes from a shell. The overall shape of the landmass is a shell. Terrapagos lives at the bottom of Area 0, the great crater of Paldea, which is the deepest point of the region, below the surface. If Paldea is built on top of a sleeping legendary turtle, the crater is where the turtle's presence is most directly felt. The terrestrialization mechanic, unique to Paldea, radiates from that crater from Terrapagos. The region's unique battle mechanic is the sleeping breath of a giant turtle. The whole map is a Pokémon, and it's been there the whole time, and the name is right there in Terrapagos, Terra for terrestrialization. Pago, from a combination of turtle imagery and the Latin for what the creature underpins. Ogerpon is the legendary Pokémon at the centre of the Teal Mask DLC. Her backstory, pieced together through the DLC's lore, she was close to a human friend. She was blamed for a tragedy caused by 3 other Pokémon, the Loyal 3, and she was driven away. The partnership destroyed by misunderstanding and betrayal. She made masks to hide her face, because her face frightened people. The theory isn't complicated. It's more of an observation that this is the most precisely human emotional narrative the franchise has put into a legendary Pokémon. Being unjustly blamed, losing the trust of someone who mattered, retreating into concealment, and continuing to exist in isolation for a very long time. Each mask she carries represents a different element, fire, water, rock, and a different aspect of her power that has changed since the betrayal. The masks are a collection of attempts to be something other than what she is, because what she is scared everyone away. Kieran's arc through the DLC is about his own version of this, feeling outpaced, feeling abandoned, redirecting that feeling into something corrosive, and his relationship with Ogerpon reflects it back at him. The resolution isn't that Ogerpon is healed or vindicated, it's that she chooses to trust again, which is a different thing, and a harder one. Ursaluna is a Hisuian Pokémon, found in Legends, Arceus native to ancient Hisui. By the time of modern Sinnoh, set in Diamond and Pearl, which take place long after Legends, Arceus, Ursaluna no longer appears in the region. The species declined. The Blood Moon Ursaluna in the Teal Mask, encountered in the forest of Kitakami, is described as the last known member of the species. It's enormous, pale, nocturnal, hunting under the full moon, solitary because there are no others. The theory: this Pokémon survived from the Hisuian era to the present day. It didn't migrate, it didn't evolve into something else. It simply persisted, possibly for thousands of years, in a world where everything else that was part of its original context, the other Ursaluna, the Hisuian Pokémon ecosystem, the people of ancient Hisui, has been gone for generations. The blood moon in its name and appearance refers to its coloration and its hunting patterns. It's adapted to the dark because the dark is when no one comes for it. It's learned to be alone because it has been alone long enough that it doesn't remember anything else. The franchise has never framed a single Pokémon as an ongoing extinction narrative before. The Teal Mask does it quietly, in an optional encounter, and the game doesn't draw particular attention to what it's doing. Area Zero is the great crater of Paldea, the deepest point of the region where the time machine operates, where Paradox Pokémon emerge, where the Area Zero Underdepths housing Terrapagos lies. The player completes the story. The credits roll. The game continues in the open world. Area Zero is still there. The machine is still running. Paradox Pokémon are still emerging. Terrapagos is presumably still present. The ecosystem at the bottom of the crater is unlike anything else in Paldea, and it's being continuously fed new organisms from different eras. The theory, Area Zero, is changing. Slowly, in ways that will take time to become visible, the ecosystem there is being altered by the steady influx of Pokémon from the past and future. Ancient predators encountering modern prey, future organisms encountering ancient environments. The crater is becoming a living experiment in what happens when you remove time from evolution's constraints. Whether that's interesting or concerning depends on your perspective. Either way, it's happening, and no one in the game is assigned to watch it. And now, the last section, the theories that are hardest to categorize and easiest to think about at 1 a.m. These are the theories that are harder to categorize. Some are meta, some are grand, some are the kind of thing that makes you look at a 30-year franchise and think, oh right, that's actually what this is. Let's go through the last 10. There are real animals in the Pokémon world, not one. Every ecological role that a real animal fills is filled by a Pokémon instead. Growlithe are dogs. Cats are not Meowth. Pidgey is a bird. Common fish are Magikarp. Bears are Ursaring. Sharks are Sharpedo. There are Pokémon that fill every niche, and none of the niches are doubled up with a real-world equivalent. These days, this isn't a world where both regular animals and Pokémon coexist, even though early Pokémon media briefly showed them together. Regular animals are simply rarely shown. The games never mention this. No character comments on it. It's just the world. Which raises a question the franchise has never answered. Where did they go? The theory. Something happened. An event, environmental, evolutionary, biological, removed or transformed the regular animal population. Either Pokémon are what animals became after that event, or the event cleared the board and Pokémon were already there. The Canalave library lore, the bit about humans and Pokémon once being the same, connects here. If the split between species happened in the Pokémon world instead of Earth-style evolution, the absence of regular animals might be the most obvious clue that the history of this world diverged from ours somewhere fundamental. The franchise never points at this. It just builds a world where an entire category of life is missing and keeps going. This is the simplest theory with the largest implications. Your copy of Pokémon Red is not the same universe as my copy. The Red on matte silver in your gold version is not the same person as the Red in my gold version, because our respective Red versions are different timelines that didn't interact. The Pokémon franchise is a multiverse, not by explicit design, but by structural necessity. Every save file creates a separate continuity, and there are tens of millions of save files. The trainer you chose, the starter you picked, the Pokémon you trained and released and stored and traded, all of it is one version among millions of simultaneous, separate versions. The theory is usually arrived at when people try to reconcile continuity between games and find that it doesn't fully hold. Different games age Red differently, or position characters at different points in their lives in ways that don't add up. The multiverse theory resolves all of it. They're not inconsistent, they're different universes, and there's something genuinely affecting about that if you sit with it. The game you played as a child, the specific team, the specific choices, the specific moment you stood on matte silver and fought, is real in its own universe. It happened. It's just in a universe no one else can visit. Missing No is the famous glitch Pokémon from Gen 1, a scrambled cluster of pixels that appears when a specific sequence of actions is performed in Cinnabar Island's coastal water. It can be caught. Its Pokédex entry shows it as Pokémon 00 with a normal style entry, though its glitchy nature can still cause odd behaviour. Encountering it causes certain game behaviours to become unstable. The official stance, Missing No, is a glitch caused by the game's programming, a gap in the non-existent Pokémon data the game tried to access that the game structure filled with whatever battle-related information was currently stored in memory. The fan theory: in the Pokémon world, Missing No is a real creature, or rather, it was. Something that existed and was removed, not from the game's data, but from the world's history, so completely that the record of it is corrupted. The data says something was here. It can't say what. This connects loosely to Spiritomb, to the idea of sins being sealed away, to the broader theme in the franchise of things that existed and were deliberately forgotten. The difference is that Spiritomb is sealed. Missing No isn't even coherent. It's just the shape of an absence. The theory doesn't require Missing No to be intentional. It just asks what story you'd tell if you wanted the glitch to be meaningful. And then it tells that story. The theory: Ash fell off his bike in episode 1, went into a coma, and everything from the first episode onwards is the dream of a 10-year-old boy who never woke up. The evidence people typically cite: Ash and Pikachu seem to reset at the start of every region. Ash never ages. He loses the important battles in ways that feel almost designed to prevent any permanent success. The world is exactly as a 10-year-old who loves Pokémon would imagine it. Robert Kirkman, creator of The Walking Dead, is sometimes cited as having said he found the theory interesting, but Pokémon's Robert Kirkman doesn't exist in the same way, and the attribution was fictional, which is itself interesting. What's actually documented? The Pokémon anime staff has addressed the aging issue directly, citing the franchise's relationship with time as intentionally non-standard. The coma theory was not specifically debunked because it wasn't specifically raised in any official capacity. The reason the theory has survived is that it explains something real, not that Ash is in a coma, but that the show has the structure and logic of a dream. Each region is self-contained. Each journey is fresh. Each loss is temporary. Each friendship, once made, is essentially permanent in emotional weight, even when the characters part. That's what 10-year-olds dream about. And whether the show intended it or not, it's what the show delivers. The Pokédex calls Arcanine the legendary Pokémon, not a legendary-seeming Pokémon. The legendary Pokémon. The species designation. In the early episodes of the anime, before the legendary bird trio were introduced clearly, there's a stone mural in an ancient location that depicts what appear to be legendary Pokémon. The mural shows 4 Pokémon. 3 of them are birds: Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres. The 4th is Arcanine. It is Moltres on the mural. Arcanine. The theory: in an early version of Gen 1, Arcanine was the 4th legendary. The fire legend, alongside the ice and electric and whatever the 3rd was going to be. Something changed in development, possibly when the legendary trio was formalised, possibly for reasons never documented, and Arcanine was moved out of that category. The anime's first few episodes were in production simultaneously with the game's development. The mural was drawn when Arcanine was still a legendary. The games were finalised with Arcanine moved to a regular species. The mural made it to air. Arcanine's official category in the Pokédex was never changed. It still says legendary. And Game Freak has never addressed it. Not in any interview, not in any supplementary material, not in any updated entry. Arceus is the god of the Pokémon universe, the creator, the origin. But the unknown are described in Johto lore as mysteriously intertwined with ancient writing and reality itself. With their origin left unclear relative to written language, human understanding, and the structures that Arceus is said to have created. The theory. The unknown are older than Arceus. They are the alphabet from which Arceus is written. Arceus is not definitively the source of the unknown, nor are the unknown definitively the source of Arceus. Their relationship is unknown and highly speculative. The evidence from the ruins of Alf in Johto, the puzzles you solve to access the ruins, spell out words. Escape, water, light, ho-oh. The unknown inside seemed to be communicating something. Not decorating, communicating. The Heart Gold and Soul Silver radio event. If you play a specific radio channel in the ruins, you hear a mysterious transmission that sounds similar to the Azure Flute, the key item for summoning Arceus, which some fans associate with Ho-Oh. The unknown seem to be holding that connection, broadcasting it, the theory being that the unknown are the base layer, the fundamental particles of reality, taking the shape of symbols. Arceus is a being of extraordinary power, but it is also a being that can be described in the unknown's alphabet, which makes the unknown, in some sense, prior. We've been through the observation that Red is on Mount Silver, alone in a blizzard with the strongest team in the game. The theory is about what the training is. Red climbed to the top of the world to do something no other trainer in the franchise is shown doing, to pursue Pokemon training as a practice in itself, with no external goal, not to win a championship, not to impress anyone, not to become something recognizable by the world's standards, just to get better. Because the only honest response to having beaten everything is to find the place where the next level of better lives and stay there. His silence isn't withdrawal, it's focus. He didn't go to Mount Silver because he had nothing left to say. He went because speech is for the world that measures things, and he was done being measured. When you fight him in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, you're not interrupting his exile. You're his test, the thing he's been preparing for without knowing exactly what form it would take, for however long he's been up there. And when you beat him, he doesn't speak because what he has to say, the whole of it, was in the battle. He'll be back on the mountain before you reach the next town. He's not finished. N's argument in Black and White. Pokemon should be free. The trainer-Pokemon relationship is exploitation. Releasing Pokemon from their Pokeballs is the moral thing to do. By the end of Pokemon Black and White, N revises this, seeing Pokemon as partners rather than tools. He acknowledges that the player character's relationship with their Pokemon seems genuinely different from what he's described. He concedes something. The theory, he was right about the system, and wrong about whether the exception to the system is possible. The daycare, the PC boxes full of Pokemon that will never be used, the competitive breeding cycle that rejects Pokemon for having the wrong stats. All of this is what N was describing. It exists. The franchise has never addressed it directly. But Ash's Pikachu, who refused to evolve because it wanted to remain what it was on its own terms, is also real within the franchise. The partnership that the player builds with a team member they've carried through an entire game, that's also real. N's argument is that the system makes genuine partnership difficult, not that genuine partnership is impossible. And the franchise has been trying to answer him ever since Black and White, without quite saying it's doing so. Each generation adds something to the friendship mechanic, the partnership framing, the language around what Pokemon want. Each one is the franchise revising its answer to the question N asked. He set off at the end of Black and White with a Pokemon he genuinely cared about, to see the world and understand the relationship better. He hasn't found his final answer. The franchise hasn't either. I find myself thinking about this one at odd hours, which is probably the sign of a theory that's either very good or very bad. Every game, every anime season, every card set, every movie, every Pokédex entry that went somewhere unexpected. If you lay all of it out and look for what keeps recurring, there's something. A question that gets asked and answered and asked again, in different forms, in different regions by different characters. What does it mean to live alongside another kind of being? Team Rocket says exploit them. Team Plasma says separate them. Team Aqua and Magma say reshape the world for one group's benefit at the other's expense. Lusamine says control them and call it love. The player character always represents something else. Genuine partnership, built through time and tested by difficulty, but the franchise never quite seals this as an answer, because it can't. The question is a real one, about coexistence, about what we owe to living things that can't always speak for themselves. It doesn't have a clean resolution in the real world either. Legends. Arceus puts you in a moment where the partnership is being built from scratch. No inherited vocabulary for it, no guarantee it will work. And you build it anyway. And then the franchise moves to the next generation and starts again. A new 10 to 12-year-old, a new region. The same question in a new coat. I don't know if Game Freak intended any of this consciously. Probably it's accumulated. Probably it's just what the premise naturally keeps producing. But it's there if you look. Ash's stated goal across the anime to become a Pokemon master. The game's implicit marketing goal, catch them all. There were 151 once, then 251, then 386, then 493, then 649, then 721, then 807, then 890, now 1028. The number keeps growing. The Pokédex is never finished. It never has been. Professor Oak said at the beginning of the game that the Pokédex needed to be filled. But he never said it could be finished. He said it needed to be filled, which is a different thing. An ongoing task, something you're always working on. The franchise built its entire premise on a goal that was never going to be achievable, and then quietly kept making it less achievable with every generation. The number isn't a target, it's a measure of how much world there is left to discover. And every 10-year-old who turns the game on for the first time gets to discover it from the beginning. The same Pokédex, the same professor, the same starter Pokémon in 3 different colours. The world keeps getting larger and none of the arrivals start with an advantage. The Pokédex is unfinished. It will keep being unfinished. And every new Pokémon is the franchise's way of saying, there's more here. There's always more. That's the most honest thing Game Freak has ever put into these games. Not in the Pokédex, not in the lore, just in the fact of the number going up. Right, that's 100. If you're still awake, genuinely, I'd love to know, then thank you for the company. And if you drifted off somewhere in the ghost types or the mechanics or the middle of the bit about Spoink not being able to stop bouncing, that's exactly what all of this was for. It'll keep. I find myself thinking about these things at odd hours. The Pokemon world has been under construction for 3 decades now, built by many different hands, and the people doing the building have been leaving things in the corners, strange notes, quiet implications, bits of mythology that the main story never asks you to find. Not because they forgot to make them accessible, but because the kind of person who looks for them is exactly the person who should find them. The theories in this video, even the ones that aren't true, even the ones that were made up and spread and became part of how people talk about the franchise, are the way a community puts down a marker. This place meant something to us. We looked closely at it. We kept going when the credits rolled. That's something. I think that's something fairly remarkable, actually, even if I can't always explain why. Anyway, thanks for being here. Sleep well if you're going. There are more of these planned. Different franchises, different kinds of lore. If that sounds like your kind of thing, subscribe and you won't miss